Good morning and welcome to Friday's OTB AM. Adrian with you this morning and Owen Shane. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
This time last week we had Ireland's number one fan, Mayo's number one fan, Seamus Coleman's number one fan, Kevin Kilbane with us, but we've to make do without this morning. How are you keeping?
Good. He came in yesterday. His excitement for tomorrow night in Castlebar just couldn't be contained. He felt he made an executive decision that he'd only be able to control himself 48 hours out from the game, not 24.
That's reasonable enough. He gets a bit passionate about these things, gets a bit carried away. He's gone over by all accounts. I mean, there isn't anybody in the office who isn't aware of that, but he is heading over there tomorrow night. We should do sort of fly the wall at some point with him. I'd like to see what he's like at a Mayo game.
To be fair, if you're going to provincial semi-finals, you're going to tell everybody about him.
That's true.
Like it is a good stamp. If you're going to league games, well, you better be preaching from the rooftops.
Well, I know there's this dismissive, you're almost sneering at the idea of, like the credibility that you get about going to a provincial semi-finals if it's nothing, right, is what you're saying.
Well, kind of. I'm saying that
you've let the guard slip.
You've got to get your badges, and there's no point having badges unless everybody knows about them.
The Kerry Mafia will be, I'm sure, even the communications already in place. Just a reminder to all members that please do not sneer at any, anything that might be perceived as an achievement by another county. Just a reminder, nobody in particular.
No, I'm saying that no matter where.
Owen Shane.
I'm saying that no matter where you're from, it's important to get that message out there that you are attending games.
But you're sneering at.
Ultimately, once the texts go around in September, it's like, oh yeah, I remember you talking about the fact that you went to a provincial semi-final back in June or back in May. Yeah, I will give you an All-Ireland ticket.
I think Kev has no great worries in that front, generally.
Generally not,
He's
no.
not like one of us schmucks. It's like, hey, Kevin Kilbane here, 4 million caps for Ireland. Any tickets for the game at the weekend?
His only worry on All-Ireland final day is just avoiding the photographers on Jones's Road.
He'd avoid them.
Notable Mayo fan.
I'd say what he does is he stands at Gills, has a couple of pints and makes a beeline for every photographer all the way down. You can be absolutely certain of it. So how's life?
Very well.
We'll get into your weekend plans a little bit earlier. People have been in touch wondering what's going on for the weekend.
Yeah, I'm sure they have been.
How's the training going?
The training, wow, okay. Not great.
How many sessions have you done under your belt now?
We only did one proper
session.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Good.
Well, that's another bit of sneering there from you.
It totally is, to be fair.
Let's just say I'm in the market for some cortisone at the moment. If anybody has any.
Can you just go up and Google it and get that good stuff into your letterbox?
Potentially, yeah. If there's any strong black market cortisone, that might do me for, say, a month.
You can get cortisone pretty easy, I presume.
Well,
I went to a doctor and said, oh, my knee's a bit dicky. Need a bit of a top up there.
Well, it's not so much the knee, really. It's the ankle is pretty bad, which shouldn't be the case with cycling, really. It's not part of the body you use. So
what's wrong with your ankle?
I'm clearly not cycling my bike very well.
I'm cycling with my ankles.
It's actually it's been a remarkable trail of discovery, cycling a bike with actual good cyclists watching you and telling you what you're doing wrong, because obviously I know how to ride a bike, but I know how to get from A to B. I don't know how to actually ride a bike properly or get the most out of
there does seem
the
to
great
be a
bike
question mark about whether you can ride a bike or not, by the way, is one thing.
What do you mean there's a
question mark? I mean, almost reading between the lines of your own recounting of how that session went, I was like, oh, I'm not sure, Owen. You don't seem to be able to get off a bike, on or off a bike.
The bike is a little bit too big.
Right.
The seat was brought down a little bit.
New information came to light.
Like as I said yesterday, I am kind of like a gymnast trying to land the perfect landing. Whenever I do stop my bicycle, I have had issues with that, and I'll admit that. It's problematic. But you can't say I can't ride a bike. I just cycle to the top of Hoth Hill.
You drive with your arse.
Do I?
I think that's what you're supposed to do, isn't it? The glutes. You're supposed to, tap into the muscles in your glutes that's where the power comes from.
Right, okay. I did not know that either. That piece of wisdom hasn't been imparted on me. They might be waiting for session 2 to actually give me that level of advancement.
I'm sure somebody will get in touch if I'm talking out my arse, but I'd be fairly certain it's not from your ankles anyway. It'd be the short story.
Well, I do know that. I do realise that the pain in my ankle is completely wrong, but ultimately I did crash the bike once or twice, but managing to stay on it is the main thing. I cycled over to the session the last day, and I just got on the bike, cycling down my road, and get to a set of traffic lights, and the lights just gone red, and I'm like, I'm going to have to stop here. Oh God, and I started to panic, and I stopped a little bit too early, and I crash into the curb, but I managed to keep going, and the bike is up in the air, and there's a big queue of traffic behind me, and I'm like, how do I get out of this situation? So I'm like, I must pretend I'm getting a very important phone call. So I whipped out my phone and pretended that I was on the phone to somebody, and I was like, everybody here thinks I'm cool.
And just then the phone rings. Was any of this caught on camera?
No, that wasn't. I was on my own, and regretting all my life decisions, but regretting them even more now. I think it's fair to say.
Have you ever had any? It sounds like you haven't really cycled very much, so maybe it's a pointless question. Did you ever have any crashes?
I probably would have when I was like cycling around at home when I was a kid, but like I don't cycle to work. I don't cycle to get from A to B. I haven't needed to use a bike in a while. Like if I'm away somewhere and there's like if it's easy to get from one place to another on a bike, I will cycle around. But this is a different level. This is actually using gears. This is actually training on a bike, which I'd never done. And you kind of realise that actually I haven't been cycling a bike that well ever. Yeah. I've just been cycling it to ride on footpaths or whatever it may be, going in a straight line.
Wasn't it? Yeah. It's from speaking to some people who are doing the triathlon. I'll give you some details of it in a second, but that's the context here in case people aren't necessarily aware of it. And we're all going to take an leg each. But some of the people have been talking about how it might be. I mean, myself maybe included. It might be a change of lifestyle. I found this thing and I'm going to do it now for the rest of my days. Mm-hmm. Is that you in cycling?
Well, a change in lifestyle, potentially. It's a really enjoyable thing to do. There's no question about that. And it would be great to keep it up and keep doing it afterwards. So potentially, I don't want to get ahead of myself now. I don't want to say after one session my life has changed.
You've done one session. Do you know what? I really am the one who's investing most in this entire thing.
Why? Do you think your life has been changed? Clear.
I think I might try and continue to do a bit of swimming afterwards, but it really has hit me in the last 48 hours about how much more I'm putting into this above anybody else. So would you agree? Would you agree that swimming is the toughest discipline that anybody has to undertake?
No.
What's your foundation for that?
Because I cycled up Hoth Hill the last day and I almost died.
I mean, okay, but at least if you were to have some sort of a collision that ideally doesn't end up with you falling off Hoth, the cliffs at Hoth there.
Could happen.
Which I think you'd want to take a serious detour to wound up anywhere near. Like the threat to life with the swim is actually fairly significant. And I'll add to that I was out with Joe Malloy doing some, let's call it open water swimming last weekend, and he's actually a really good swimmer. And I am not in any way, shape or form.
But what does that have to do with your life expectancy, Joe being a good swimmer?
Well, what I'm saying is that I'm the most put upon in this entire thing. That's what I'm trying to get at here.
Just because you're up against Joe?
No, because swimming is the toughest discipline. It's really an arguable point. I shouldn't have even asked the question. And I'm a poor swimmer. So,
but that's your fault, really, rather than the discipline's fault.
The main reason it took me is that I've done like maybe 7 or 8 swimming sessions already. You've been up on the bike once.
Yeah. Like,
I'm just saying.
Ultimately, that's my problem, isn't it? You're going to develop a life-changing hobby, obviously, hopefully. And maybe it'll take me a bit longer.
It's great. It's like 9 o'clock at night. I've rediscovered evenings. At 9 o'clock at night, I'll go to the swimming pool.
Yeah? But how does that differ from the actual open water training? Like, I presume it's way tougher.
It will be like you up in Hoth Head on your proper racing bike, and then the stabilisers around your gaff, sort of thing.
Right, okay.
It's chalk and cheese. But you obviously got to do it and get through it, do loads and loads and loads of it to build up the stamina. I can only do 8 lengths at the minute, one after another.
I think we have some video of your training.
Good session down in Monkstown. Good confidence boost after a pretty shitty day at Sea Point on Sunday evening. So confidence is up 8 lengths in a row. Woo! Just need to knock out 30 of those now in a row, and I'll be flying it. The work goes on.
It's nice. It's good insight there, flying the wall sort of stuff.
That's kind of the idea.
I'm glad we got you in that state of mind rather than this state of mind.
The GoPro. But 8 lengths, that's all I can do. And it's the equivalent of 30. And then also you put that into open water. It's a totally different...
Yeah, it's a bit of a mountain to climb. That vlog, is it a continuous thing? Are we going to see more of it?
Like you're saying, well, I'd like to see more of that.
Yes.
I don't know, it just struck me when I left. And obviously the endorphins were flying and I thought, I'll do this.
Are you getting a good buzz off it afterwards?
It's class, yeah. Like honestly, like my evenings, given my time in life, are not spent doing anything that exciting, other than trying to sort of, re-energise myself. But this is class. Like, I've refound time in the day that I didn't realise existed.
Yeah, wow, it's a real moment of enlightenment for you.
Yeah. Speak to me now in a couple of months where you're like, remember we were having that chat? I'd be like, oh yeah, swimming. Screw that.
This is like a Prophet Muhammad moment for you, isn't it? It's your whole mind has been blown.
Yeah, it's up there. BMW and Triathlon Ireland, as you'll probably know by now if you've been tuned in at any point over the last number of weeks, are challenging the off-the-ball team to #TryForPieta this summer. So we're raising funds for Pieta House, and for more information you can check out triathlonireland.com, and you'll see the link there as well for more information on #TryForPieta. BMW, proud partner of Triathlon Ireland and title sponsor of the BMW Triathlon National Series. 17 of the most exciting triathlon races in Ireland. We're doing one of them in Dunmore, and doing a triathlon apparently is easier than you think. People of all ages and abilities can take part. It's the short story, Owen.
Is that a throw to me? Am I supposed to say something here?
No, but people of all ages and abilities.
I think what they mean by that is if you manage to get within a position that you're able to complete one of the disciplines, the other ones kind of knock themselves off very easily. Like, you think of this and you're like, God, I'd never be able to do a 20-kilometre cycle or whatever, a 750-metre swim. It's like, if you're able to complete one of them, the other two come so easily. Like, what our instructor the other day was saying that a couple of the other people in our cycling session was that, X and Y, you've been doing the swim and you've been training for the full triathlon, so that cycle up there is no bother to you. So I think that's what they mean. But at the start I was like, how is it easier than you think? But I think that's what they mean by that. It actually is, once you complete the first leg, I think the start is always the hardest. And like, we'll all be doing the full triathlon this time next year, won't we?
No, I'll be doing like Olympic swimming or something like that. Here's what's coming up over the course of the show. Delighted to have you with us. Keep your comments coming in. If you're a keen triathlete, if you have any advice for us, we'll take all of that over the course of the morning, so do get in touch. Here's what's coming up between now and around 9:30, thereabouts. We're going to get you the details of what's happening in the back pages of the newspapers in just a few moments' time. Owen's got a few interesting stories going on around the world of sport, around the world as well. That's just before 8 o'clock. Enda McGinley is going to preview a couple of interesting games in Ulster, particularly, and some other games to touch on as well, to touch on Tyrone, Fermanagh Donegal this weekend as well, and the Dubs. We can't not have a chat about the Dubs, so we're going to do that in the company of Enda McGinley. We're going to talk Leinster football. The big one this weekend, as everybody knows, Westmeath Laois at O'Connor Park on Sunday, so that's going to be the main focus for us clearly this morning, coming your way at just before 8:30. The sports news with Neil Tracy. Alan Quinlan's going to be in to preview the Pro14 Final and talk about a few other little bits and pieces as well. David News 4 has some interesting stuff to say in the papers this morning. I'm sure we'll get his thoughts on that as well. Keith Andrews is going to preview Monday's Championship playoff final, the 170 million quid game. We'll get Keith's thoughts on that and a few more things as well, I'm sure. So you can keep in touch with us over the course of the morning, get your comments into us. But right now, time for the papers. Going to kick things off with the Irish Daily Mirror here. Ram, don't ruin my Inter dream. So we did bring you the story a couple of weeks ago that Romelu Lukaku was kind of hinting that he may want out of Manchester United. It's become a little bit more than a hint here, writes Jeremy Cross. And also some beautiful food photographs from Liverpool's preparation camp in Spain, where they're picking up some lovely tasty food. Bit of Salt Bay action going on there was my main thought. That's the Irish Daily Mirror this morning.
The Irish Times leads with rugby. Noosa 4 sets minimum target of World Cup semi-final place, says Jerry Thornley. Salaries of Irish players to remain below minimum wage. This is for the men's international sevens team. And Matt Williams saying Leinster can look to Ali's Rumble in the Jungle for victory template. So the comparison here is that Glasgow are George Foreman. Not loved by everyone, but respected for the power of their attack. From the short jabs of their forward runners to destructive combinations of the interplay between forwards and backs, with the knockout right hook ability of Stuart Hogley. See what he did there? He says, before the Rumble in the Jungle, Ali taught the locals in Zaire to chant Ali Bomaye. During the days leading up to the fight, the locals were all chanting this, and this angered Foreman. Then the rope-a-dope frustrated him, and Ali, laying back on the ropes with no fear, made him mad. Great warriors like Ali are calculated, determined and coldly ruthless, just like Leinster apparently.
It was the exact theme that the Crusaders used, I think, 2 years ago. Apparently Scott Robertson has a theme every year that he uses. He introduces his squad. You can't speak about the theme until a certain time passes, so we don't know what the one last year was or this year's. But the Rumble in the Jungle was that year's. It ended up with the Super Rugby final in Johannesburg, which was obviously fitting, and it had been 9 years since the Crusaders, I think, had won the Super 14 title, and 9 years between drinks as well for Ali. So
he's got me excited for this. He's saying, I can't help but think Leo Cullen, in his own quiet way, is laying the beginnings of an audacious trap, whatever they may be. He says, this is not the Rumble in the Jungle, more the Celtic Park Shuffle.
The Irish Examiner this morning, a picture of John Egan there looking pretty happy. Journeyman arrives. He relishes continuous circuitous route I should say, to the Premier League. This is obviously from their sunny base in Portugal as they prepare for the upcoming games. That's the front page of the Irish Examiner. Thoughts inside from Ronan O'Gara as well on Doug Howlett's Munster departure. He may be Munster's greatest signing and he carried that aura lightly, writes Rog inside.
The Irish Daily Mail leads with still on track. Ireland prime for a World Cup semi, says David Nusafora. Collar, meanwhile, oversees cash-strapped FAI's finances. That is Joseph Collar, the finance director of UEFA, coming in to help the FAI. And the little label up at the top, Yellow Peril, the championship heat intensifies on Davy Fitz's Wexford. It's not a big weekend of hurling in an overall sense, but it is a huge, huge one for the Wexford hurlers.
The Irish Independent, meanwhile, a lovely photograph here from the Giro d'Italia yesterday, where it was a Cork man who finished third in this stage, Eddie Dunbar, and a beautiful photograph there from the streets on the Giro d'Italia. San Maurizio is the name of the town. In terms of the detail on it there, Quinn takes key role in FAI talks. Dan MacDonald writes here, business group to meet Ross and Mooney. That's Shane Ross and Noel Mooney as UEFA send finance director to Dublin is another story that dominates. I'm sure there's more detail on it in some of the other papers. Ross, it says, was opposed to the FAI bringing in Noel Mooney as a stopgap option for 6 months and a secondment from UEFA. It was one line that I hadn't been aware of up to this point. But the main point being that Niall Quinn is to take a central role in Irish football's power play, and he's committed to discussions with Shane Ross and Noel Mooney. It's been something that's been mooted for quite some time. We shall see how it plays out over the next while. And Rory O'Connor writing about the semi-finals. David Nusafora, some interesting stuff to say. Semi-finals, the starting point of Ireland's World Cup ambitions.
The Herald goes with under the radar, low-key start for Dubs with a picture of Ciarán Kilkenny there. 16,000 people expected to show up in Portlaoise tomorrow. That means 6,000 tickets will go unused for the start of the Dublin team's drive for 5. You've also got that Quinn story about him playing a key role in the new FAI.
The Irish Sun, Seamus will Luca and see. Those great Luca Connell headlines just keep on coming. Owen Cowser here saying that there won't be any hard sell. Big talking point in yesterday's show about Luca Connell, whether he should be capped or not. And in, out, shake it all about is Pep plotting transfer spree, Leroy Sané and Harry Maguire among his targets, according to Mike McGrath there.
The Irish Daily Star goes with a couple of football stories. Mercenaries, says the story at the back of Lothar Matthäus, talking about Manchester United, saying they've accused them of signing too many mercenaries, players who don't care about the club. You've got a picture here of the Liverpool team in Spain. Pork clops, sir, says the headline. You've also got an inset picture of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, who's got his glasses set down on the bridge of his nose, making him look a little bit like Salt Bay, so I hope he followed through with the actual dash of salt on his pork chop. And fans snub Baku final. Arsenal and Chelsea are sending back a staggering 50% of their tickets for the Baku final. And the stadium could be only half full, 69,000 seats in that stadium in Baku, the Olympic Stadium. I love the way these countries actually have an Olympic stadium, even though they're never going to, well, okay, that's touch wood, that Azerbaijan will never host the Olympics. They could well do, but like, there's mad countries that have Olympic stadiums that will never be within a prayer of hosting the Olympic Games.
You would assume that's the exact reason they've built it and named it that way.
Because they can say to the Olympic Council, we've got one. Like Cambodia have an Olympic stadium. I don't think they're going to get an Olympic Games anytime soon.
No, that they're ready to bid. It does look like Salt Bay is cooking for Liverpool.
No, Salt Bay is based in Dubai.
No, I know it's not actual Salt Bay, but...
Oh, sorry. It looks. What do you mean? It looks like Salt Bay is cooking for Liverpool?
He's the guy. This guy.
Yeah. That was just the comparison I just made about Oxlade-Chamberlain.
I mentioned it a bit earlier, but you weren't listening.
Well, I need to really tune in then.
I mean, if Owen isn't listening, we're really screwed. The Times Ireland edition, meanwhile, Kohler called in to assess FAI finances, writes John Fallon here. This is the news reported in a lot of the newspapers. Joseph Kohler is one of the leading heads at UEFA. He's the finance director, and he's coming in as secondment on the same day that Noel Mooney will arrive on June the 3rd. He will be in situ as well, and they're going to do a bit of a review of FAI's finances. Has been discussed over the last while. 5 Irishmen make the Pro14 dream team, writes Kieran O'Rahillig, and a photograph of James McLean as well, as you can see there on that graphic, going through his motions in the sunshine in Portugal. And he's got the "You are now entering free Derry" as one of the most prominent tattoos in his legs. And also, I can imagine that you probably need less sun cream when you've got that many tats.
Does it actually protect you from?
It must to some degree.
God, that's a layer of science now I didn't expect to get into.
Science.
If that's a surefire way of me reducing my factor 50 usage on a yearly basis, then I'll get tattoos everywhere. The reason why I'm not paying attention is I've got to check and double check and triple check all these stories I'm about to read out, because on the back of the Racing Post, Boris Johnson is favoured to replace Theresa May, according to the odds. And the stage is set on their main story on the back. Villa odds on to repeat Wembley heartache, says Dan Childs. The front of the Racing Post then says it's going to be a classic, previews and best bets as the Irish Guineas meeting kicks off at the Curragh, and Hot Property, Too Darn Hot, joins Magna at head of Irish 2000 market.
The Daily Telegraph are to be commended for giving prominence to this story in the front page of the sports section today. Pure evil, and a photograph there of Bob Higgins, ex-Southampton coach, youth coach Higgins, guilty of 45 charges of indecent assault on 23 teenage boys. The newspaper reports the 9-week trial wrapped up yesterday, and it looks as though Bob Higgins is going to spend the rest of his life in jail.
And finally for me, it's The Guardian. They leave it with Arsene Wenger saying it's a bit of a nightmare. He's hit out at the Mkhitaryan no-go and Baku travel hitches.
That's the newspapers. Give you a bit of detail about what's going on inside some of them now as well. We mentioned... One story we didn't mention is in the... it is covered in a lot of the... I don't think we mentioned it. We honestly covered in a lot of the newspapers this morning. Murphy, Dublin will easily win historic 5th in a row. This was a headline that jumped out at me today. It was Vinnie Murphy who's been speaking to Dublin fans. I think it's a Dublin fans podcast. And at last, somebody's come out and said... Of course they're going to win it. They're going to win this thing easy. Have you not seen them over the last 4 or 5 years? Vinnie Murphy has really weighed in a way that I'm sure Jim Gavin hasn't been necessarily over-delighted with. He says, last year they walked away with the All-Ireland. They're going to do the same this year. Once they get the mental preparation right, I think they're going to win it as easily as they won it last year. I'm just hoping they meet a Mayo or a Kerry on the way, because last year they were saying, well, they won it easy, but you didn't beat a Mayo or a Kerry. I just think beat Mayo or Kerry in the semi-final and Mayo or Kerry in the final, and we'll have the 5 in a row.
Yeah, that was on the Hill 16 podcast.
Easy as that.
I like that. I like that brash confidence.
Brash.
If you ask any Dublin fan, how would you like to win the All-Ireland? It would be beating Mayo and beating Kerry en route, because last year they knocked Tyrone off the perch in the All-Ireland final.
It
was too easy.
Even from the Super 8 stages on, it was...
But it would be kind of a full house. They could say that they beat this current iteration of Tyrone close-ish to their peak.
Yeah.
Even though that's not really saying much in terms of being a great team. But then the question around last year was, did they really come up against anybody else who could be considered as the second best team in the country? And I think Mayo would have a fairly strong claim to that position at the moment. Kerry might have a strong claim to third best team in the country at the moment. So there'd be nothing more satisfying for them to beat Mayo in the semi-final and Kerry in the final, I think. Do what they couldn't do in 1982. Are
you licking your Salt Bay chops at the idea that a Dubs legend has come out and said, yeah, we'll win it easy, and hopefully meet those lads on the way?
Well, I think he has to be commended for speaking what every Dublin fan is thinking. Like, Dublin fans are terrible at Yeraism. They try their best to be cute hooers. They're terrible at it. Dublin people should get used to what their whole psyche has built them to be, which is cocky, which is being arrogant, which is lording it over everybody when their team is doing well. That's what Dublin fans are supposed to be. So I've got way more respect for Vinnie Murphy in this regard than if he was like, yeah, sure, we'll see how the season goes, and sure, we'll be very lucky, we'll be privileged to win 5 in a row. He should be saying, nah, we'll easily walk this, which he's kind of saying, and we're going to win again next year and the year after. Stop talking about the 5 in a row is what he's saying. Let's start talking about the 6 and 7.
I mean, it's so dangerous though, isn't it? Like, that's the inherent...
Well, he's not in the camp. He's not in the camp. He can say what he wants. He's like us watching in from the outside. It's like, we're not going to hear that from anybody in the camp, and I doubt anybody in the camp actually believes that.
Most, you know what? It's an interesting point, and it's clearly true, but most former players you talk to do adopt that sort of cautious...
Yep.
Well, you know, I think, geez, Mayo could be thereabouts. Kerry, God, looking good. Most of them adopt that approach.
And even if you talk to Stephen Doyle out in the office at any point, he's adopted that approach as well. And anybody who we've worked with who is a good Dublin GAA person will adopt that approach. But they're adopting the Kerry model for it to be a supporter of Dublin, which doesn't work like that. When you've got your population, when you've got your funding, when you've got the team that you've got and the strength and depth that you've got, you can afford to be as brash as you want. There are no pitfalls here. The team itself can carry on with this veneer of humility, which actually isn't a veneer, it's actually a true sense of humility, and they can carry on pretending that they don't think they're the best team in the country. They have that deep-rooted confidence. They don't have the arrogance that some of the other supporters have. But I'm saying, if you're a Dublin fan and you're not connected to the team, be arrogant, enjoy these moments, enjoy lording it over everybody else.
Yeah, Kildare's Stephen Doyle is backing Dublin for the 5 in a row, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, you can take that up with him.
One of the other things we want to touch on is David Nucifora is covering a lot of the newspapers this morning, saying that the expectation for this Ireland team is that they're going to go one better than they've ever done before and reach a semi-final of a World Cup. And it is covering a lot. It is a bit of a news line. It's covering a lot of the newspapers. It actually, when you read into it, makes utter sense. And I don't think he's discussing anything that he wouldn't have sat down with. Probably had the discussion with Joe Schmidt post 2015 and set a goal for 2019, which you would think is probably, look at the target here is to get to a semi-final. Anything after that's bonus territory. I mean, maybe even after the Six Nations, a semi-final is nearly bonus territory, but it's not. It isn't. I'm laying the gauntlet onto Joe Schmidt. We got to reach semi-final here. This is total disaster. I'm sure these are all in-house agreed targets.
Yeah, it's mad how one person's position is based on one result alone. Like David Nucifora's entire career with the IRFU is based on the quarter-final in the 2019 Rugby World Cup. That is the only thing that matters. Every single decision that David Nucifora has made that has ruffled a few feathers has come back to the idea that, well, it's all in the greater good of the Irish rugby team. It's all in the greater good of Ireland not succumbing to a similar situation that we succumbed to in 2015, which was that we didn't have enough players who were ready to step up to the big game. The Leinster fans who were pissed off about Joey Carberry moving south, it doesn't matter. The 2019 World Cup is when it pays off. The Ulster fans pissed off about Ruan Pinar leaving, doesn't matter. It's because of the 2019 World Cup. It's all going to pay off.
Yeah, and I mean they do now look like good decisions. Like given how everything is unfolding at both those provinces in those positions, they do now look like solid decisions.
Don't get me wrong, they do, but ultimately there are still fans of Leinster and Ulster who I feel at the time of those decisions will be rightly annoyed with David Nucifora for playing a part in all of this, because they are just thinking, if they just think about the fortunes of their province. Now, luckily, they're all Ireland fans as well, for about 99% of them. So they can see the greater good in this as well. But we knew what the quarter-final would be quite some time ago. We knew that regardless of form, regardless of what position Ireland were in or the rest of the rugby world was in, the 2019 World Cup quarter-final would be an extremely tough undertaking for Ireland, because we knew if we get out of our pool, it's going to be South Africa or it's going to be New Zealand that we beat in the quarter-final. It doesn't matter what.
We're all thinking we're going to win the pool in South Africa. It's going to be South Africa, and sure, look, like we beat New Zealand. Jesus, sure, South Africa.
That
attitude, taking the Vinnie Murphy approach.
Like that attitude was there, especially when we beat them, hockeyed them really in Dublin. What was it, November 2017 at this point?
A couple of years ago.
Like when South Africa were at a very low ebb. They've come back nicely here. We've got ahead of ourselves to a point where we think that this World Cup quarter-final is now the thing that once Ireland are in a good position for, they will win. Ireland could have the best team of all time and have the best World Cup of all time, and all the preparation is going so well. You're still coming up against the All Blacks or the Springboks. Ireland can play brilliantly and lose the game. And ultimately this whole David Nucifora tenure is viewed as something of a failure. Because we've spoken about this so much, this has been hammered home to the nth degree.
It is only that he will sit down with Philip Brown and whoever he answers to, and will say, listen, I mean, the plan was absolutely solid from my point of view. If you look at it, those decisions we made, John Cooney became a player that nobody could have ever expected him to become. Joey Carberry, we knew the path he was on. He needed game time. I facilitated all of that. I made tough decisions. They weren't popular decisions. I put us in the best possible position. We blew it in the quarterfinals, but that ain't my fault, pal. He does get to have that conversation, and because the longer this thing goes on with Ireland at World Cup, how could it not be in people's minds is the other thing. Like, particularly when it comes to a pressure point, 60 minutes in, the game is tight. We've never made it to a semi-final. It's like there must be some sort of psychological thing there must be at some point or another that you could push it out of your mind. I'm sure they do a whole bunch of psychology work around it, but it must be a factor at some point. The longer it goes on, the bloody worse it gets.
Well, you talk about a hypothetical there. I think it's far from a hypothetical. I think 60 minutes in a World Cup quarter-final and it being tight is best case scenario, really. Like, I don't think we're going to hockey South Africa or New Zealand. Hot take there this morning that we're not going to hockey South Africa or New Zealand.
Hot take graphic.
So I think Ireland, to win the quarter-final, will be in a position after an hour in the World Cup quarter-final where it's extremely tight. As you say, surely there has to be a factor where it's like, yeah, the weight of everything the RFU has done over the last 4 years depends on these next 20 minutes. It has to seep in. That's up to Joe Schmidt, though, as you say rightly. That's up to the squad. That's up to everybody in the backroom team to make sure that that mentality is right. And ultimately, you can look at it in isolation, and Nucifor will hold up his hands and say, yeah, I've done everything in my power to ensure it went well. Do the people who are hardcore Ulster and Leinster fans then start to think to themselves, God, I wonder, would we have had the extra bit of juice to do back-to-back European Cups? Would Ulster fans be saying to themselves, God, we might have had a bit of an extra legacy of Ruan Pienaar if he was around for a season? Like, I'm kind of overstating the importance of that, because like John Cooney's been brilliant, but I do wonder if the attitude will change a small bit, because so far it has worked.
Yeah, fans can be fickle. Bit of success, all makes sense, everybody's happy, until like a month later where you're like, that Joey Carberry in a red jersey still doesn't quite work for me.
I think it's perfect.
We mentioned, just to very quickly touch before Owen gives us a roundup of a few bits and pieces that are happening outside of the back pages of the newspapers this morning. We mentioned the Daily Telegraph's reporting this morning. It's the journalist Ben Rumsby writing here on the paedophile Bob Collins, who's a former Southampton and Peterborough youth coach, whose 9-week trial for various sexual assault allegations came to an end yesterday, and it looks as though he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison for a number of counts, guilty on 45 of 51 counts that were held against him for the sexual assault of kids. Took advantage of children that were coming through football's youth system at the time, as I said, Southampton and Peterborough, over a 25-year period, described as a serial predator, and as I said, it is expected that more victims are going to come forward as well. Well done to the Telegraph for giving the story such due prominence this morning, and also well done to one of the very early victims who had come forward to bring this case to public light, who was Greg Llewellyn, who waived his right to anonymity yesterday to come out and speak about the impact that this had on him, and the hope that more people will come forward as well. Ben Rumsby writes that during his trial, many of his victims described Bob Higgins as godlike, their mentor and the father figure, as well as speaking about how they feared complaining about him, and that would spell the end of their dream to become a professional footballer. It's such an important point, I think, to be taken away from this entire thing, and that's probably it, that obviously parents and kids invest so much in this thing being a success, not to lose sight of something as gruesome as this. Higgins is also accused, Llewellyn, the victim I should say, is also accused Southampton at the time of failing to do enough to protect him and other victims. He says you have to point the finger, and there was some negligence there, but there was also only one perpetrator. So all the details on that story, and there are many of them, grim in most instances, in the Daily Telegraph this morning.
There's a couple of online stories we want to get to. One of them we're going to postpone for about 20 minutes or so because it's GA related, and we'll do it on the back of Enda McGinley. But just to touch on one that I don't think made the papers. The Mirror did report it last night, though, that the Cristiano Ronaldo case, the rape allegation from Catherine Mayorga in Vegas, has moved on another step. Of course, the alleged incident took place 10 years ago, and we spoke about this during the Champions League before Juventus got knocked out, about where exactly this case is at. And essentially, the lawyers for Catherine Mayorga had a lot of trouble in tracking down Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, you don't actually have, like the United States, in Italy, to physically provide or produce a summons to the person, or to the person you want to summon to court, essentially.
You don't have to.
You don't have to. All you need is an address, and they struggle to get that. So essentially, Mayorga's lawyers have managed to track him down. They've tracked down his home in Turin, and they've been basically hunting him since October, when the US police reopened the inquiry. So it's taken this long to actually find an address. So the lawyers for Cristiano Ronaldo are obviously trying to get the case dismissed, and they've denied that they've declined to provide its address. The documents then basically saying records go blank when they search for anything for Ronaldo. Property records have been blacked out. So that's the allegation from the Mayorga camp. But they have found his Turin address, and so what happens next basically is they get in touch with the Italian authority. So the Italy Central Authority, which it's called, is now on the case. They delivered a summons to the complaint. So ultimately, he hasn't been summoned just yet, but they've tracked him down, and the Italy department is now on it. So that's the next step on this, because this has been one of these stories where every couple of days or every couple of weeks you're like, what's actually going on here?
That's right.
And essentially, a US judge is the person who's kept this alive, because I didn't actually realise this. So, according to the Mirror, it says, last month, with time running out and Mallorca's legal team struggling to find someone to track down the Portugal national team captain, a US judge allowed an extra 180 days for the summons to be delivered. So if it wasn't for that US judge giving an extension on the summons, this case could have been dead in the water. But that extension was granted, the 180 days was granted, and within that window, they found Ronaldo's address, and you'd expect now the Italian authorities follow this up. So it'll be interesting to see how this one develops. But very, very interesting. Like, there was a great ESPN piece done a couple of months ago about the problems that journalists have had in terms of even contacting lawyers stateside on behalf of Ronaldo as to what is actually going on. We've got some more clarity this morning.
Yeah. Interesting to see, and we'll follow its movements over the last while. You've been tweeting out some interesting stories to it at some interesting times as well, so keep an eye on Owen's Twitter feed. I'm sure we'll have more details on that as it unfolds over the next number of weeks. We're going to turn to GAA though. For now, I'm delighted to say that Enda McGinley joins us on the line. Morning to you, Enda.
Morning, man.
A few games we want to get stuck into. Fermanagh down, maybe chief amongst them, and Fermanagh Donegal, I should say. Looking at Armagh down last weekend, Enda, is Ulster football the new hurling?
Yeah, well, I suppose us up here have always crowed that the Ulster Championship is one of the most competitive. The last 2 years, Donegal and Tyrone really walked away with it, and neither had a competitive game on their way to the respective titles. But if you take Monaghan and Cavan on Saturday night, and then Armagh down, two phenomenal games, two big results for the respective counties. All counties on a sense that there's something there to be fought for, like even down in defeat, will feel that there was something to build on. And if you look at the previous week, Derry against Tyrone, Derry put in a very credible display against Tyrone. So Ulster is feeling fairly positive at the minute. Even the football style has been good. So Fermanagh Donegal this weekend and Tyrone Antrim, the two big games, I suppose. Fermanagh Donegal, definitely the pick of them. Fermanagh once again been written off, and they have made a habit of being absolute giant killers. They've beaten Armagh in the championship up here when they weren't expected to, and of course they famously beat Monaghan last year when they weren't expected to. Of course that got them to the Ulster final, where Donegal absolutely hockeyed them really out the gate. So it gives Fermanagh a chance to try and bounce back from that, and they carry a confidence with them that despite all their detractors, that they can have a style of football that challenges the top teams, and they have made a habit of doing that.
Yeah, they might fit the kind of traditional Ulster. They might be the team this weekend that sort of puts a bit of calmness to all this chat about how great Ulster football is, right? Like the meanest defence, I think, are certainly one of them across all the national leagues. The Green Wall, it's been described in Gaelic life, and you have that then versus a Donegal team who have been pretty can score at will. Again, one of the top scorers, I think, across all the divisions. So with that mix, sort of what happens here at the weekend?
Well, with a very threatening forward line and a team in Fermanagh that's trying to go up against a top team like Donegal, the natural tendency is for that team to go more defensive, given that that's Fermanagh's plan A, plan B and probably plan C as well. I don't expect them to change, but there was a great quote. James McMahon, their centre-half back, gave an interview to Irish News during the weekend, and he says the Fermanagh footballers are completely confident. They know exactly where they are at and who they are and what they are. So that to me speaks of a team that they are united behind what Rory Gallagher and Rice McMenamin has styled them as. They see themselves as sort of outsiders of the establishment, not really being given the respect they deserve. They know they're punching above their weight. They know how few players, how few clubs they have in Fermanagh, and how incredibly well they are doing to be as competitive as they are in Division 2. They were pushing for promotion up until the last couple of games. So I think people are being not realising where Fermanagh is coming from and not giving them the credit they deserve. That suits Fermanagh to the T, and they'll use that as their ammunition coming into this Donegal game.
And so in that context, does it not matter almost to a certain degree in terms, like, it's you know, everybody hates us and we don't care type of an attitude, and the defensive football is not particularly amazing to play, I'm sure, as a footballer, as one of the, or indeed as one of the Fermanagh forwards. So is that maybe a key part of it? And also that we might not see in that context the evolution that we perhaps saw at Donegal a number of years ago, where they went with that system for a couple of years in the interests of trying to build into something that was a bit more of an attacking style down the line. We might not see that with Fermanagh.
Yeah, I think you're fully right. I agree. I don't think any of that outside criticism matters at all to Fermanagh. I think you're absolutely right. In fact, it actually plays into their psychology. Ricey's over them. I know Ricey well. Ricey never really cared what too many people thought of him, to be fair, and he was all the stronger for it. So Fermanagh will be like that. I think Fermanagh realise that at the level that they're trying to compete at, the teams that they want to be competing, and they want to be competing against the top teams, I think they're right in this. I think they are much more likely to be able to do that, playing the way they are, than trying to play some all-out offensive style in a really open brand of football. I don't think they have the players to be able to. They would have the players to be able to do that against the Division 4s and Division 3s. But Fermanagh want to live at a higher level, and for that they have to keep it tight at the back. And I think anybody that sort of ridiculously slags them off for that, I think is very, very foolish and isn't coming from where Fermanagh is coming from. It's up to Donegal to break it down, and to be fair, I think Donegal have the armoury and the attacking threats to be able to do that.
Why then in Ulster last year did we see such an effective performance from them against Monaghan, and then quite a poor performance in the Ulster final? They were very, very harshly criticised in that Ulster final last year. There seemed to be a bit of a disparity in the performance. Was there also a disparity in the approach, Enda?
I think Fermanagh, having beat Monaghan, they got huge slaps in the back. They got a huge well of positivity behind them. And again, I'm not sure that suits their psyche. I think they prefer coming in as underdogs. They were coming in against Donegal, and Donegal got the 2 early goals in that game. The one thing you can't do as a defensive team is to suffer early goals, because then you have to start trying to come out a wee bit at the game, and then that just opens up your defence even more. So it was, the critical thing about that game was that it went wrong early days for Fermanagh, and when that happened, then they were really out the gate. The other thing was they were playing on a big stage. It was a great summer's day in Clonus, and it is more difficult, as we have seen through all the other teams that have employed it. It is more difficult to employ the defensive strategies on the big summer days on the really big pitches. Saturday's or Sunday's game in Brewster Park isn't that one. So I think it'll suit them okay. Yeah,
I think they might have got nervous in front of Varley and Foster there last year. That was probably the big factor in that performance. Like looking at looking at a team coming in under the radar, I think it's fair to say Donegal are doing the same. They would be delighted with the fact that they got to spend this spring in Division 2. They finished the league campaign really, really strongly. Namely, Michael Murphy looked to be back to his best almost at the end of the league campaign. In terms of what you've seen, I know we only got a few glimpses of them on television. Has the Stephen Rochford effect given them something new and a new impetus this year?
Yeah, that's the big question, and I suppose Donegal's last really big meaningful game in reality was actually the Tyrone defeat up in Ballybofey, which would have really hurt them. And they have went away. They've had the privacy of Division 2 that Division 2 affords them to sort of rebuild. They were shorn of some of their star names during the National League, but that allowed the younger players at a level that they were able to play at to be able to play, get lots of experience, and I think Donegal is coming in pretty good shape. Paddy McBrearty will be coming back. This will get him his game time. Donegal will be expecting to beat Fermanagh. I think they'll know it'll be pretty sticky. They'll know it'll probably not be very attractive, but they're expecting to beat Fermanagh, and then sets up the big semi-final potentially with Tyrone. Probably the key thing with Rochford, and whether it was Rochford or whether it was Bonner was intending to do it anyway, Michael Murphy is playing more up the pitch than we have seen him in previous years. I think everybody involved in GA wants that to happen. They want to see Michael Murphy to cut loose a wee bit more. He played really well in some of the games during the National League. Yes, he's a leader. Yes, he's an exceptionally calm presence on the pitch, and he does so much work for them. But Donegal and the rest of the country are better whenever Michael Murphy is cutting loose in terms of a forward role. And I think Rochford, whether it's Rochford's direct effect or not, but they do appear to be a wee bit more attacking this year.
Obviously we've seen these two play already this year. Fermanagh had been 5 points down in the league, come back to win it by 3. Yeah. Horrible game in a lot of ways, a lot of niggle about it, a lot of needle in it. Are we expecting much of the same, or, I mean, generally we try and see teams develop a little bit during the league, and we might see something slightly different from them in the Championship, but what are we expecting in terms of that game? Because everybody's talking about this as well, Donegal are going to win it, but most recent evidence is on Fermanagh's side.
Well, that's it. any game like this with Fermanagh against the top dogs, you always go with the top dogs, and that's the same for Sunday. The National League game, again, we were expecting Donegal to come through that, and Fermanagh went up there and produced a big performance and got a win that nobody was expecting. You can look at it that maybe will have alerted Donegal, and that win then will have actually come against Fermanagh's want to be in the long grass, so to speak. It was funny, I work alongside the Fermanagh team doctor, and after that National League game he came in, he was just glowing, and he says, it was just a lovely niggly game. and he was loving that fact. So I think again, Fermanagh won't shy away from that end of it. They will not want this to be an open exhibition of football, because Donegal have some serious young talent that would just relish in that atmosphere. They will make it the opposite. That's not to say there'll be anything ridiculous going on, but Donegal will be in for a very, very hard day's work. Any score will be very hard gained. Michael Murphy's going to be well tailed. Conor McManus got tailed last year brilliantly. Michael Murphy's going to get the same this year, so it'll be a while for Donegal to sort of eke out a lead, which I eventually expect them to. But I wouldn't write Fermanagh off simply because they've been written off too many times before, and they have come up with the goods.
Yeah, but you are going for Donegal.
I am.
Yeah, all right. Brewster Park on Sunday at 2 o'clock for Fermanagh. Donegal. There's no point in discussing the Tyrone-Antrim game, with all due respect to Antrim, in any great detail, but one interesting thing that I looked at in terms of your own night of Tyrone, and over the last couple of days, Lee Brennan, the latest player to walk there. Obviously there's some suggestions that it's a lack of game time, the rationale behind that. Obviously we've seen Ronan O'Neill leaving, Mark Bradley is gone. From Mickey's point of view, losing one, obviously careless, losing three, exceptionally bad luck. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's not ideal at all, but ironically, because of the change in play that Mickey has sort of embarked on this year, or is fully embraced this year, them losses aren't as much talked about within Tyrone as in other years. One of the huge criticisms that Mickey's critics would have up here, and he has plenty of them within his own county, that every now and then start chipping away. When we were playing very, very defensively, and I think Sean Kavanagh maybe had a go on the Sunday game one time about it, when Tyrone were playing defensively, there was an argument that these young talented forwards couldn't play within that system. They couldn't be the target man up there, and so he was not bringing them young talented players through because he was completely attached to his defensive system. If Tyrone was still playing a defensive system, and you seen a forward like Lee Brennan and you seen Ronan O'Neill walk away, the critics would have all been saying, that just shows again that these young talented forwards have no place in this completely defensive Tyrone setup. Because Tyrone actually at the minute are playing an attacking style that many in the county are very excited upon, that is getting positive reviews and getting good results. Suddenly the walking away of these players, there has been a shrug in shoulders in some by many, saying, well, look, we're playing big ball into big men, and if they're not good enough to be in rounded, well then we're no major loss, we're going well at the minute. As always, the reality is probably somewhere in between them two things. I think any team needs to have a varied arsenal, be it on the bench or on the team. You need a different style of player for different games. Going in, looking forward, if Tyrone do progress, which you expect them to, into the Super 8s, you're going to need some sort of different game changers coming in. Conor McAlliskey has come back from his ACL. He looks as if he's in fine fettle. I presume he's going to get game time again, Antrim. But an injury here, an injury there, and then suddenly where are you? Them players that we've lost were sort of key players coming in and around the setup. So Mickey will be annoyed that they've went. But it is difficult. The modern county player, the level that they have to put in, and the lack of game time, it's about the only sport in the world that for 16, 17, 18 players on that county squad, they are top players in their sport. They train so much, and yet they never get games, be it with the club or county. And so I can understand any player walking away, but Lee Brennan walking away has not made Tyrone stronger, definitely. The style of play they're playing at the minute, they'll probably cope okay, but make no bones about it, Lee Brennan would have been a useful introduction at some stage in this championship.
Yeah, for sure. Like you spoke about Donegal and their performance at Ballybofey against Tyrone last year. The reason why Donegal got knocked out of the championship last summer was essentially because of Tyrone's depth. It was their subs that came off the bench and saw them over the line that day in Ballybofey for that brilliant win. And you also, like, without that depth, even just on a singular focus on the tactics for a moment, is it really so dependent on someone like Colin McShane inside there, big man to catch the ball for this to happen? Could none of these forwards who've walked away been able to contribute in that department?
Well, I think they don't have Cathal McShane's skill sets, but at the same stage Cathal doesn't have their skill sets either. Cathal has been playing phenomenally well, but his return rate or his shot accuracy and ratio is sometimes not as good as some of them other players who are more out and out finishers. Now at the minute the game is about the ball winning inside man, and Cathal McShane has essentially transformed. His form has allowed Tyrone to transform into this attacking outfit that they are at the minute. So them other players, for me, yes, there is always still a role for them in some games or in some time of the game. The issue with the likes of a Lee Brennan coming off a pitch onto a game in the last 15-20 minutes, the opponents know about him. The defenders realise this is somebody that needs marked. Their attention is drawn to him. They are worried about him. If you lose them forwards that are coming in with a wee bit of a reputation, it's strange, but reputation counts at county level. It sort of attracts defenders to you, and it might create space for others. And if a team can look at your forwards and look at your bench and say there's nothing really there that scares us, it means that they can completely focus on themselves and they're not focused on you at all. That might be good in some ways, but I would prefer to have things there that are giving teams food for thought. And as I say, Lee Brennan, yes, I can fully understand he hadn't earned his place on the team. He'd got a few opportunities and it hadn't really worked well for him. He hadn't got as much game time with the new system, so we probably don't know how he would have bedded into that. But Mickey will have been frustrated with him leaving, absolutely. And Mickey will know he's that wee bit poorer off. But if a player wants to leave, then you have to accept that. And I can understand Lee's decision at that level too. Yeah,
he probably wouldn't have been far off the 15, I suppose, somewhere along the line. Probably would have got game time.
Ironically, particularly against Antrim.
Yeah,
I would easily have seen them, the likes of him getting decent game time.
Yeah. One of the tricks, obviously, of sports management being that it's happy enough to keep 15, 16, 17 players interested, and the greater challenge obviously is the ones slightly beyond that. But look, we'll see how it plays out over the course of summer. To get your thoughts on Kieran Donaghy's proposals in just a second, but Mayo Roscommon, the last point to touch on with you in terms of games this weekend, and we're talking about a team that are third favourites for the All-Ireland here against a team that are 125 to 1 to win the All-Ireland, and yet somehow in Connacht it's still a conversation about who's going to win this game at the weekend.
And that's because probably, well, you could. I was going to say no more so than, or particularly about Roscommon. You don't sometimes know what Roscommon is going to turn up, but then Mayo, of course, aren't exactly shy in that aspect of a team's personality either. Roscommon, the disappointment of last year's Super 8 and the damage done by the defeats and the extensiveness of the defeats in last year's Super 8, I think are being still felt in Roscommon. Anthony Cunningham's obviously coming in. You will get a bounce with the new manager. They didn't set the world alight, obviously, in the league. They got relegated, but then it's a tough division for them to be hitting in. They're one of them borderline teams that are always going to be thereabouts. But Roscommon now being written off, that's what gives them the chance. Mayo being strong favourites, that's what leaves them vulnerable. Mayo's playing with a very new forward line. That does afford them the strength off the bench that people are saying in many quarters might turn this game. But Roscommon aren't shying that way either. To be fair, I do expect Enda Smith to start. But I can see why people are believing that Roscommon have a real chance in this game. They seem to be more physically at the level. They seem to be doing a lot of work on that during the league, and that might also have contributed to some of their weaker league performances. The fact that they seem to be putting in a bigger effort on the conditioning side of things, where they got exposed in the gap last year in the Super 8s.
Yeah,
we'll see now. They have if a team wants to come from the long grass, will they have fertilised that long grass that it's almost covered them completely? I didn't realise that was the odds them to win the All-Ireland, but that's phenomenal for a team that was in the Super 8 last year. Against Mayo, you're looking at the momentum. You're looking at their league title win which was brilliant. Everybody enjoyed seeing it. Did their league campaign fully merit that? I think the defeat to Dublin is still in a lot of people's minds when they come to think about this Mayo team. The defence looks really solid. The forward line, to a degree, is unknown, and Roscommon will play on that. Roscommon will make this very, very physical and very, very difficult for them. Mayo forwards that don't have the championship experience there as yet, and maybe that Mayo bench will be used a wee bit earlier than James Horn will be wanting to. But it's Mayo's chance to start to step up. I suppose the thing that would push me definitely towards Mayo is the fact, if you look back at Horn's record within Mayo, within the Connacht Championship, was phenomenal. The three campaigns now where Mayo have failed to do it will have hurt Horn watching in from the sidelines, and he'll have used that as huge ambition or as huge motivation within that Mayo camp. So I expect Mayo to come out hungry, motivated by that desire to win the Connacht titles, which in Horn's time had become regular and almost meaningless, but now suddenly means something again, and Horn will have that's easy motivation from Horn's point of view.
Yeah, it's funny. He was unbeaten in Connacht. I'd totally forgotten about it. Reading up on it yesterday, I'd totally forgotten that he'd shaky start against London. I think maybe his very first game, and then unbeaten after that. And as you say, it had become a bit boring actually. But yeah, I'm sure Mayo fans would can bring us back in some of that dullness. We wanted to move on, obviously, and.
Yeah, like when I talk about Kieran Donaghy's championship proposal, and which he spoke about here on the show on Wednesday morning. Basically, he wants the provincial championships brought back to February and March, played off in round robin format, so you're protecting the provinces and those trophies. Then the championship starts proper in the middle or to the end of May, most likely the end of May, where you've got 2 groups of 8 in a Tier 1 championship and 2 groups of 8 in a Tier 2 championship. Everybody plays their 7 opponents in the group, and then the top 2 from each group go through to the All-Ireland semi-finals, and then the bottom in each group in Tier 1 gets relegated, and the finalists in Tier 2 get promoted. That's the long and short of it, Enda. What do you think?
There's much, I suppose. There will be people that are in 2 complete different sides here, and one of them, which is my side, which is what Kieran has sort of advocated, is going to a more a tiered system first of all, and then a league-based system leading in directly into the championship. That for me will produce the best football for the summer. It produces a really interesting campaign that you're looking at every fixture and you're wondering who's going to win and who's not. There's so many permutations. The key games coming thick and fast that we enjoy during the National League, having that replicated in the summer. I think all of them things are hugely positive. There's the other group, and their primary, there'll be 2 issues. One is the tiered thing. There'll be the group completely against the tiered setup. And then there's a group completely that holds the provincial championships in sort of holy grail and untouchable territory. Unfortunately, this suggestion from Kieran, which I like, will come up against them 2 opponents, and having them 2 opponents probably means it'll struggle to get through where it really matters. But I think there's huge positives within it, and I think if we're trialling other things and we're willing to trial things, I think we'd be foolish not to at some stage grasp the nettle and trial something like this.
Yeah, I mean, was there any, like, in terms of the one thing that we haven't heard a huge amount of it is, and it's blatantly because there aren't a huge amount of them, but in terms of criticisms of it or tweaks of it, or, like, I know even as we discussed it,
there's always tweaks, and this is the thing. If you know, you could have. You'll have many nights of pub competition. Whenever I was listening to the show and listening to Kieran's proposals, a few things for me were that the New York thing was mentioned, but it was very much about, well, they're still in the Connacht Championship, but we can't quite have the cake and eat it. And again, I'd be trying to sell this proposal, but you can't quite sell New York. Well, you're still in the Connacht Championship. If we're playing the Connacht Championships or the provincial championships in February and March, they're essentially taking the place of the Dr. McKenna Cups and the FBD leagues. We're very, very much diminishing them as the main GAA's competition. So yes, they might have the title of the provincial championship, but playing them there 2 months separate, like not just 1 month, but 2 months separate from the main summer's Gaelic competition, and saying New York, you can play in that pre-season competition, but you're not in any of our main competitions. So you're either putting New York out of it. I think that's a token gesture which won't go down well. For me, I would probably tweak it, and maybe to give the provincial championships some sort of crumb. I would have the winner of it, that guarantees them Tier 1 in that year. So that might mean at a late stage that one of the lower teams might drop out of Tier 1. But it means that for all teams, technically, at the start of the year in January or February, all teams have the potential of going for Sam Maguire, which is something that all teams want to claim for. It might suit them other teams that they can push a wee bit harder early on, where the likes of the Kerrys or the Dublins or the Tyrones mightn't be going flat out in February and March if this big competition is coming up in the summer. And so the other counties, the likes of a Fermanagh could come through and win an Ulster. The likes of a Tipperary or a Cork could come through and win a Munster, and that would get them their Tier 1 status that year. So I think I'd probably see if that's possible in there to create more meaning for the provincial championships and give this thing that people talk about, all teams having a chance of Sam in any given year. It sort of gives that through the back door.
I love that, by the way. I think that's a rock of absolute sense, isn't it? Like, it is that thing of, it was the one thing that was slightly missing. Every team starts out with the chance of getting Sam Maguire, and it's still there. Like, if you're good enough, you're going to do it.
Yeah, you can target your provincial.
What did the CCCC say?
CCC. It's a good idea, and obviously it's not all the suggestions. Kieran's going to do a bit of a feedback column next week in terms of all the suggestions that have come in. Ultimately, his argument is that if you get relegated the previous year, then ultimately that's up to you to not be in that competition, to actually be in the mix for Sam Maguire. Maybe it would be more palatable for all of the counties individually, where they have to have that chance for Sam Maguire in that one calendar year. The question is, as you said, a 2-month gap. Is that going to completely devalue the provincial championships, or will it still manage to hold something, just because you do have the local derby nature to it, which perhaps you might not get in the summer? I don't know. As you say, when it comes to this sort of thing, grasping the nettle and actually trying something out mightn't be the worst idea.
In classic CCCC parlance, and Owen has spoken a lot there and actually not said very much as to...
I think it's a good shout. I think it's a good shout.
I suppose the other thing, the 2 up and the 2 down thing, or the going straight to the semi-finals, which means you're only really taking 2 out of each group. In the National League, one of the amazing things about the National League, especially with the semi-finals and final, was that when you had a top 4, every single game, almost right down to the last round, teams could go up, and teams even could end up in a relegation battle. Having a top 2, you could have the bottom 3-4 teams that are gone early days. Now, I suppose they're still fighting to save off relegation, but I wonder, is there still room for a quarter-final, or maybe just do away with it? Like, it would be something, for me, would be food for thought rather than anything definitive from my point of view. But the top 2, if 1 or 2 teams suffered a couple of early losses, it sort of puts them completely out of the running. For top 4, it would be more meaningful all the way through.
Yeah, that was something that was mentioned actually by Jared the other morning, and I think that's a good suggestion. Or at least a top 3, and there's like a wild card weekend where second place, third, the week before the All-Ireland semi-final, so that the 1 seed, so to speak, has that week off, and that's their reward for that. So you could actually fit it into the calendar.
Yeah. No, I think overall it has to be thought about. I think, like, the straight knockout championship was in a way a much greater carrot, and had held much greater potential for any team that wanted to make a breakthrough. When we've moved away from that and went to the backdoor system, it was the hope that would help build the other teams, give the smaller teams more games. It really hasn't. It has just let the strong become stronger, because it has given all of them a second chance if they were caught on the hop early. I think the Super 8s then were being brought in again to maybe give a breakthrough team, say if Fermanagh or Roscommon or a team like that got into the Super 8s, that give them 3 games against top opposition in the summer, and that might bring them on. Well, Roscommon found out last year it absolutely didn't. We'll find out on this weekend the repercussions of that. I think Roscommon have been set back by that, whereas a one-off defeat in a quarter-final as we had before the Super 8s wouldn't have been anywhere near as damaging. The other ironic thing is we're essentially doing away with the National League then with these proposals. The National League, and that will be some people's argument, we're doing away with potentially our best competition at the minute. But the problem with that is it is our best competition because it's even games, and then it's a completely insulted and forgotten about competition. So the National League has done all it could do as a competition to show how great it is, and yet it is routinely just forgotten about and dismissed because it's just the league. So I think anybody that's trying to completely defend the National League, I think it only shows that games at similar levels are brilliant and regular games are brilliant. I think it's not held in massive store by players or by the country. So I think it is something it could be sacrificed. I think the provincial championships, you'll face a much greater battle to shift them out of their prime slot at the minute.
Brilliant, Enda. Thanks a million.
No problem, man.
And again, on the line there, looking ahead to the weekend's action and giving his thoughts as well. And Kieran Donaghy's, the Donaghy-Sheehan accord.
It was mostly Donaghy's.
Was it?
Yeah, it was.
Are you not the Richard Ashcroft in this dynamic?
Good comparison there.
Yeah.
For everybody at home, do you want to explain the Richard Ashcroft?
The Verve Bittersweet Symphony. When I'll try and
so Kieran Donaghy's
butcher this
Jagger,
as much as I can. So he wrote Bittersweet Symphony, sample a little bit of a Rolling Stones tune. Had agreed that he would sample, let's say, whatever it was, 5 seconds. Ended up putting 15 seconds in. Rolling Stones management say, sorry pal, contract over, you took too much of the song, we're taking 100% of that, the royalties for that, or else you can jolly well take it off the shelf. So they left it on. 22 years later, the said manager has since left us, and Richard Ashcroft picks up the call to his son, who's the new Stones manager, and he goes, listen, I'll take the all rights back if you don't mind. And he said, absolutely, go for it.
If it takes me 22 years to get the royalties from the Shot Clock Championship format, I'll take that. Be a long time waiting, but I'll get it. There's another story we wanted to get to before we kind of wrap up the GA segment this morning, and we're kind of going to bring you some things that I spotted online, kind of doing the rounds and whatever it may be on Reddit, on Twitter, and actually I didn't just go online today, I went back in time. I went back to 2010.
Love this.
I went back to Twitter in 2010. It did actually exist, believe it or not, the last time Dublin lost a championship match, which was against Meath in the year 2010. As I said, a very good summer of sport. And so just looking through some of the tweets, let's bring up a couple of them on screen. The reaction before the game through Nicky Byrne here saying, Dublin are playing Meath today. Come on, you boys in blue. Come on, you boys in blue. Come on, you boys in blue. You wouldn't see that today.
People were excited.
People were excited for Dublin.
Big sports fans. Nicky Byrne's a big sports fan, I suppose.
He is, to be fair. I'm not sure with the hype be as much around a Dublin Meath game today. Perhaps a little bit more given Meath's league campaign, but certainly not in the interim from 2010. A couple of more tweets for you here from that day. Dr. Cara Kelly saying, go on the Royal, Meath GA bringing sexy football back by beating Dublin by 10 points. 10 points indeed. 5-9 to 13 points was the final scoreline that day. Let's bring up another one. Paul Murdoch, who works here, actually said, flicked over to the Dublin Meath game. Plenty of empty seats. Must be pretty worrying for the GAA. Can't remember that before.
Wow, it was like
imagine how much more worrying it is now. The attendance that day was 60,000. Granted, it was a double header with your beloved Westmeath up against Louth.
Yeah, well, they would have brought in at least 2,000 or 3,000.
They would have done 60,000 people there, and still worrying signs that the attendances might be dropping. I'm not sure have they ever got close to 60 then since that occasion. And just one more tweet to bring up to you from that day. Eric Lauder saying, me doing a Germany on Dublin. What could he possibly mean? Is it the 7 goals they scored? No, that couldn't possibly be, because that happened in 2014. Let's bring you the front page of the Irish Times sports section the following morning. Dazzling Germany humiliate England. I didn't realise this.
Looks like you've got the 2010. It looks like it's in black and white. This is
I couldn't get a colour version online. What a day of sport. I do obviously have vivid recollection of Frank Lampard's shot hitting the crossbar, which of course was the only reason England got knocked out of the World Cup. It wasn't because Germany scored 4 goals. I don't actually have a whole pile of memory of watching the game live, of Meath's avalanche of goals burying Dublin, as Sean Moran puts it. Let's see the newspapers that did lead with Dublin and Meath. The Irish Independent went with 5-star Royals. Meath's goal burst sends Dublin packing.
It was obviously big enough news that's the front page of the Indo sports section, obviously.
Yeah, so I guess, obviously the Germany-England game was mental as well, so it was either or, really. The Examiner went with their championship section, Royal Flush, 5-goal Meath, rout Dubs in Croker landslide. And really, you kind of start to think about that Dublin team, and it's like, this was a terrible Dublin team. Oh, sorry. Now's the time for Gilroy to prove himself, says Kieran Whelan in the Herald. Defence were left exposed by sudden change in tactics. And the defence being left exposed by sudden change in tactics is probably bang on, because, as I said, kind of tongue-in-cheek, did a terrible Dublin defence. If you go through that team from goalkeeper all through the full back line that were, you would imagine, responsible for conceding 5 goals against Meath, we can go through it now. Let's see who was in goals that day for Dublin. It was, of course, Stephen Cluxton. Let's see who was corner back for Dublin that day. Philly McMahon. Full back for Dublin, one Rory O'Carroll. And the other corner back, Michael Fitzsimons.
Wow.
Not a bad backline for Dublin. Meath slamming in 5 goals against them. The first time they conceded that many goals since the 1978 All-Ireland final against Kerry. The other thing I wanted to do here...
Jesus. For God's sake, Owen.
The other thing I wanted to do
At least try and make some attempt to sort of pretend that you weren't just in there to get a slight Kerry mention in.
Well, it was a long old record. 32 years. Let's, to be fair, the only reason I did this was so I could look back through the old BBC website, which just brings me such pangs of nostalgia of the early days of Twitter and social media. And let's have a look at the Germany and England teams, shall we? Like the England team that went down 4-1.
A golden age of English football, Owen.
Golden era. That backline. Glenn Johnson, Ashley Cole Terry. Upson scored that day, which I do recall. Gareth Barry, the Gerrard and Lampard
James
thing.
Milner before he became James Milner to a certain degree.
Well, it was certainly version 1.
Decent James Milner.
Version 1 or version 2 of James Milner for sure. And then Rooney and Defoe up front. Like that Germany team was obviously sensational. But
the best state of the bench, by the way.
Like also going through that day on Twitter, you have people not making the comparison just between the match of Meath scoring goals against Dublin and Germany scoring goals against England, but also the psyche around the England footballers and the Dublin footballers.
Humble?
Overhyped, overrated, some would say, and would never, ever, ever get the job done. True for England, but of course Pat Gilroy managed to turn it around a year later for Dublin, where that soft underbelly was turned right around and they became All-Ireland champions. So, moral of the story is, even after getting hammered in 2009 and getting hammered in 2010, if you're from Dublin, chin up, it'll always come back around.
England never should have been beaten 4-1 that day. That was an absolute travesty. Absolute travesty.
Because it should have been
about 8-2. It really should have been. I didn't watch very much of it back earlier on, but I was like, holy hell, they were pumped here.
Yeah.
Like actually, just after Lampard scored the phantom goal that never was, might have been Podolski up the other end, should have absolutely buried it straight away afterwards. Like the idea that, in my mind's eye, it was like, remember that England were robbed that time? They were not robbed. No. At all.
That was peak English delusion, was the fact that they might have been able to contend, or that they might have been able to beat that Germany team.
Thanks for that. We might come back to some of the other Leinster fixtures in a little bit. Somebody's been in touch, by the way, Jimmy McCullough, in our discussion at the top of the show on Twitter, to say that swimming is clearly the toughest discipline. The 5k run and the 20-kilometre cycle should easily be completed within 30 minutes without really pushing yourself. Man up, Owen.
Well,
just passing out the comments.
If he's got any tips on manning up, I would happily do.
Do more training is probably.
How does one man up?
I think
is it like
more training is probably step 1.
Okay.
How many sessions are you going to have actually done by the time you get to race?
Well, I'm going to a music festival in Barcelona next weekend, so that's not ideal. I'll be back to step -5.
Warm weather training camp.
I might have to go to that. I might go out on the bike once or twice, and if the pain is enough, I might actually say, listen, I'm selling my ticket. Here's a free wristband. I'm going up to Girona, where Lance Armstrong used to live, for the good stuff, the good mountains, I mean.
Right. Time to talk rugby in a few minutes' time. We're going to have Neil in as well to bring us up to speed with everything that's happening in the world of live sport this morning. For all of that, the Irish Rugby International, Lindsay Pete, spoke to Nathan on last night's Off the Ball about her considered response to Israel Folau's homophobic social media post, speaking to us ahead of the Union Cup, Europe's largest LGBT inclusive rugby tournament, which will take place in Dublin next month.
I know you wrote an article over the past couple of weeks, very strong article about Israel Folau's comments, and we've covered it in depth here over the last few weeks, and your take on it. When you first heard them, were you shocked, or was the very fact of his public profile shocking, and that he would express these sort of views? He'd obviously expressed similar views previously. What were your initial thoughts when you heard it?
As I said, I didn't really get too caught up in it. I took time over it. As I said in the letter, which was I was conflicted whether to write, because it brings up such a strong topic and argument. I did feel pity, because to me he's an absolutely fantastic athlete and rugby player. He's adorned by many. He's in such a privileged position, and the influence that message and that tweet would have had on so many vulnerable people. I was saddened, really, to be honest, and that's my take on it. It's an awful bit of pressure. It's awful pressure to be in the public eye and to have that responsibility to look at your actions all the time. But to me, for someone in that position, you do have to be mindful. It's not to take away of his religious belief or how he wants to live his life through his religion. That, you know, he's well entitled to do that. But for me, for an athlete in the public eye and adorned by so many, I think there's a responsibility there. So I was very saddened at the comments, and I hoped that I tried to address it in a positive way, and to try and help those who may be suffering in any part of their life. Just to say that, please be strong. There are better days, and if it affected one person, to help them, then that was it, and try and negate any maybe sadness or upset that they had.
Lindsay Peat might just be one of the most interesting people in Irish sport, and you can hear that full conversation with Nathan from last night's show up on offtheball.com. We're going to have Alan Quinlan shortly to look ahead to the Pro14 Final this weekend. We've had a comment in from the aptly named Deco Limerick on Facebook to say hello from NYC. So good morning to you, Deco Limerick. Hope all is well with you. Do keep the comments coming in. Neil Tracy, good morning to you.
How are you doing?
How's form? All good?
All good, yeah.
Just back from the holidays?
Just back. Well, back a week or so.
Yeah. Where were you?
I was in Lisbon for a few days.
Lovely.
Yeah. It was only alright. Lost my phone.
Oh.
So that immediately killed the enjoyment.
You've got a bad record of going abroad and bad things happening to you.
Yeah, actually. That's 2 trips in a row now.
What happened to you last time you were abroad?
I was in Barcelona and I randomly just got punched out of nowhere.
What?
Yeah, that was back in November. Yeah.
Wow.
No idea what it was about.
Before or after? Somebody punched you, legged it?
Yeah, that was it. In a bar, yeah.
Wow.
Incredible.
Do these things...
I'm not a troublemaker.
It just seems that every time I go abroad, I get punched in the head or somebody steals my phone. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I think the phone was more lost than stolen.
Right.
Yeah.
Also in a pub?
Possible.
Very good, very good. We're going to get your... we've an exciting new feature coming your way, folks. It's coming on to Off the Ball starting this weekend.
Yeah, starting tomorrow.
Right, we'll give you details in just a few minutes. Before all of that, what's happening? David Nucifora has been out and about.
All over the papers this morning. He has said a few things. First of all, that reaching a World Cup semi-final is the minimum requirement for Ireland in Japan this year. He's been speaking to the media just a few days after signing his new 3-year contract. Ireland have never been beyond the last 8 of the tournament. Nucifora says that has to be the starting point for their ambitions this autumn. He says, we'd be kidding ourselves if we thought anything less than a semi-final would be good enough. He's also had his say on Rob Kearney's future. He says he's very hopeful that Kearney will stay in Ireland after the World Cup in Japan. The 33-year-old, whose current deal is set to expire after the tournament, is yet to agree a new contract either with the province or the union. Earlier this week, his manager Dave McHugh claimed the offer from the IRFU was well below what it needed to be. But Nucifora says they remain in discussions with the player and that they are hopeful of reaching an agreement.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that players are generally happy to take a bit of a pay cut and then stay on to see out their contract. If that's somehow agreeable, obviously in some other cases, Sean O'Brien specifically, it hadn't been. But interestingly, they've obviously, like Nucifora talks about the idea that they obviously need to bring players through. Sometimes that means we got to get rid of the old guys to...
yeah, I guess maybe the length of the contract might be part of the issue as much as the money as well.
They don't generally tend to offer much more than a year.
Yeah.
So,
because you're talking about, what, a 33-year-old player coming into a contract at the very start of a World Cup cycle. I'm sure there's a bit of negotiating to be done on how long that contract is.
All right.
Well, in terms of the Pro14, Leinster will name their team this lunchtime for tomorrow's Guinness Pro14 Final against the Glasgow Warriors. There are set to be changes from the semi-final win against Munster. As we know, Devin Toner is ruled out through injury, so Scott Fardy is likely to come in. Johnny Sexton is also expected to return to the side. He started on the bench at the RDS a week ago. After the Champions Cup final defeat against Saracens, Leinster will be eager to finish the season on a high, and Cian Healy says getting their hands on a trophy is important, but they won't be panicking if they don't.
As a player, would you feel a little bit disappointed after getting to 2 finals and not having a trophy to show for all your hard work?
Of course you would, yeah. I think there's gains to be made if we do get a trophy, and if we don't get a trophy, you're going to pick up on things. Even last season, you don't win and just dust off and say that was grand. You know, there's stuff to be reviewed, and whether even if you're sitting at the top, there's people chasing you, and you got to change up your game or you get caught. And you know, we'll have to continue to grow as a squad and what we do and what we're about. So that's going to be going into next season and what's happening over the summer, but coming into this week, it'll just be preparing the way we prepare and how we train and how we know at the moment, and you see now with the pitch and walkthroughs and meetings and stuff how the lads want us to do this week.
Yeah, staying with the Pro 14, there were 7 Irish-based players named in the Guinness Pro 14's Dream Team, which was announced last night. Scott Fardy is the only Leinster player selected, which probably says a lot about how well they've rotated their sides throughout the year. Munster, Ulster and Connacht have 2 each. Like Fardy, Munster's Tadhg Byrne is there for the 2nd year in a row, along with Peter O'Mahony. John Cooney from Ulster is also there for the 2nd year going, while Stuart McCluskey is there, also there from Dan McFarlane's side, while Connacht's Jack Carty is named at out-half, as well as the province's Players Player of the Year, Colby Fainga, is there on the back row.
2 players from the 2 finalists. 2 players combined from the 2 finalists.
Yeah,
12 teams entire.
11.
Was it 11?
11 across all of them, yeah. It was only Munster, Ulster, Connacht and Edinburgh were the only to have multiple players in it.
It's just a bit mad that a team could end up like that. There's only 2 players from the 2 finalists. It'd be unheard of in any other tournament, and that like 1 player from whoever eventually wins it.
Yeah, I think it probably says a lot about how much, there is a lot of rotating throughout the season, and I think as well players have to have played a certain number of games to qualify for it as well.
If you look at the nominees list, it's not as if, there are some players there like CJ Stander and a few others, Alan Wynne-Jones, that you would think might have had a bit of a sort of a shake at it, but it's not as if you look at the list and go,
yeah, they probably just haven't played enough games in the Pro 14 this season. Yeah. It's strictly Pro 14. You're discounting Challenge Cup and Champions Cup as well. So
fair enough.
I think a lot of those lads who are probably doing at the coalface, doing the grunt of the work throughout the year.
In a word, who wins the weekend?
Just about Leinster, I think.
Good answer.
I think it'll be a better game than the Champions Cup final.
What do you? Since you can't call it the double, are you going to call it the 3 and 4 or something like that? Have you come up with a snappy name?
I think Glasgow are going to win it.
Right.
I wouldn't be shocked. Yeah.
Getting involved in your sort of Kerry, getting ahead of yourself.
The 2 and 4.
Be another email incoming shortly.
Another tweet saying the almost the greatest achievement by any team ever.
As I said to Nathan last night, if I haven't got any invites to a corporate area to go and sup wine, so there probably won't be too many game tweeting.
Meanwhile, the SSE Trusted League Premier Division, just goal difference separates Dundalk from Shamrock Rovers heading into tonight's games. Rovers host Cork City, have won 3 of their last 4 to get back into mid-table. That's at 8. Then at 7:45, Dundalk will go for a 9th win in 10 when they host St. Pat's. Bohemians take on Sligo Rovers. Finn Harps travel to Derry, and Waterford are up against UCD. Meanwhile, All-Ireland champions, football champions Dublin begin their drive for 5 tomorrow evening. Jim Gavin's side take on Louth at O'Moore Park in Portlaoise, embarking on what they hope will be a 9th Leinster title in a row. The other quarter-final tomorrow evening sees Carlow take on Meath, and on Sunday Tullamore is to host a doubleheader, Laois against Westmeath and Kildare up against Longford. The big hurling game of the weekend comes from Pearse Stadium in Galway. Defending Leinster champions Galway host Wexford. Galway got to sit out last weekend after defeating Carlow a fortnight ago, while Wexford had to settle for a draw with Dublin in their opener last week. After that game, manager Davy Fitzgerald told our reporter Stephen Doyle he expects the championship to go right down to the last day of the round-robin series.
Tough ask next week to go to Galway, I'll tell you. It's coming thick and thin now,
Yeah, Galway, of course, last time you played them in the quarter-final, and I suppose you were probably came out of that game really disappointed that you didn't put on the performance you'd expect from your players, maybe.
We did. We played a great first half. We should have been up way more. I think anyone will see that we should have been up 5 or 6 points that day. I won't say why that happened, but it's very obvious to anyone that was at the game why it happened. So it was. But our second half was very poor that day. First half was great, second half was very poor. But you know what? No matter what happens, we'll be fighting till the last game of this. We'll be right in there with a shot, you know?
Davey could be like, I won't tell you what the meaning of life is, but everybody knows what the obvious meaning of life is.
It's common knowledge. It's common knowledge.
And then tell you what it is.
But he isn't telling you. Finally as well, Michael Hoey's made a poor start on day 2 of the Made in Denmark event on the European Tour. 2 bogeys early in his round. He's now 1 under after 6 holes, 4 off the lead. Paul Dunn tees off this afternoon from 3 under, while Gavin Moynihan is also 3 over. Finally, there's racing this evening at the Curragh, which goes off at 4:55, and there's also a meeting in Downpatrick at 5:15.
So is it going to be called the Road to Tokyo, or the Road to Japan, or Tracy's Tokyo?
I'm open to suggestions.
What do you think, Owen?
We scrambled with a Road to Japan working title for the opening one yesterday. But look,
the Road to
I'm happy to change that.
Croker, Diviva, Paris, London.
Like the jaunt to Japan would be the one if you wanted to go for something to Japan. But thankfully, Adrian came up with Tracy's Tokyo, and we have it on the record that he did, so it wouldn't be seen as a huge ego trip for you to title it as such, because it's not your idea. So
yeah,
Tracy's Tokyo, I think.
We just agree that now and lock it down.
No, we'll open the floor to suggestions.
All right.
See, does anyone have any better ideas?
So, to fully inform people then of what it's about, so they know actually what they need to name.
Yeah, so between now and the World Cup, every week we're going to pick one team that's involved in the World Cup. I think we're just going to go through pool by pool, one team each week, do a feature on them. Probably about 30 minutes ago, we'll speak to whoever we can, former players, coaches, journalists in the country. This week, for example, Scotland are first up. We said we'd go with them because it's Pool A, Ireland's pool. First game that Ireland are going to be playing is against Scotland. So yesterday I spoke to Scott Hastings, Scottish legend, and also to Tom English of BBC Scotland. He literally wrote the book on that great Scottish team of the early 90s, which Scott Hastings would have been a part of, and we spoke about the 1991 World Cup and how that was a complete missed opportunity for them, having got to the semi-final and being beaten 9-6 by England after Scott's brother Gavin had missed a penalty straight in front of the sticks to put them 9-6 in front with 15 minutes to go. And I suppose it's just going to be looking back at the memories of the World Cup. We'll speak to whoever we can. I think we're planning Japan as the next one next week.
Good.
We're just going to go through pool by pool. So I'm really looking forward to the Namibias, Tonga, trying to see who we can speak to from these countries and who we can find
just to hear about their history and
their history at the World Cup, because we know so much about New Zealand and Australia and England and Wales and all that. I'm really looking forward to the tier 2 nations that kind of don't really know too much about.
Sounds brilliant. Can't wait for it.
I'm looking forward to it anyway.
5:30 of a Saturday evening, is that the
Don't know the exact time.
Right.
That could change week to week.
Okay.
There might be the odd week where we do one on a Saturday and one on a Sunday as well, because we have worked out that there are not enough Saturdays to just do one a week. So there'll be the odd 2 in a week.
16 weeks to go, is that where we're at?
I don't know exactly how many it is. It's less than 20 or 19 anyway.
Making me nervous now. Excellent. I am looking forward to it. So it's Scotland this week. Gavin Hastings and Tom
Scott
English.
Hastings.
Scott Hastings.
I made that mistake.
In the interview?
Right at the end.
Oh, good man.
Gavin, thanks for joining us. And he said, anytime, and you can call me Scott as well.
Good way to get it underway.
But then you're panicking, did I just call him Gavin for the entire thing? Yeah. But no, I didn't, thankfully. It was just right at the end.
Fair play. We better leave that in now. And Tom English as well on All Things Scotland. So do we have a confirmed time for tomorrow yet?
I don't have a confirmed time for tomorrow.
We'll speak with the producer that
I will,
get that sorted out. Very good. And if people have any ideas around names for it, I think it's going to be hard to beat Tracy's Tokyo, if I'm being honest, but slightly misleading title as well, because obviously it ain't all Tokyo.
And the Scotland games in Yokohama as well. So.
Too bogged down in the detail.
Yeah. It is. The Tide 5 was obviously the best pun we've come up with for. You could go with the Tokyo Tide 5 almost, but we'll leave that one there. I'm trying my best to rack my brains about every single pun.
Can someone figure out what is the Tide 5 in Japanese?
There you go.
Yeah, Tokyo or bust. Nico Konkabor is suggesting here on YouTube. Not great, to be fair. Let's call it Let's get some decent comments in on that. Thanks, Whelan. Good luck with it. Really look forward to it. A couple of other comments in here. Shane Finnegan wondering if he's missed the Ulster GA preview. You have, and it was brilliant. Probably one of the best segments we've ever done, would you say?
The best.
Yeah, so it is up on offtheball.com shortly, so go and check it out there with Enda McGinley. And Germanus McGrinder on YouTube says, as an Antrim man, I must admit that we have no chance, I'm afraid to say. That's magnanimous in the extreme. But there we go. I'm afraid I might have just said something there.
That must be the nicest man of all time, because you literally said in the Ulster preview, there's no point previewing this game.
Yeah, I was expecting maybe that I might get a comment or two on that, but I think it's also a reasonable comment. How about next stop Japan, says somebody Cook on Twitter. Next stop Japan.
You're just deciding this.
I'm hopeful that somebody will come in with something a bit better, but failing that, it's Tracy's Tokyo. It could be fluid, right? Let's change it in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. Thanks a million for now. 9 o'clock, almost thereabouts. Alan Quinlan on the way. And ahead of the Union Cup, Ireland's Lindsay Peat recalling on last night's show the overwhelming pride and joy she felt as Ireland amended the constitution to allow same-sex marriage.
You know, at the time, it sort of brought myself and my wife back, well, my wife now, back to a time where you were, I suppose, that vulnerable part of your life where you're like, you know, nearly coming out all over again and this acceptance. And it was just an historic day and it was such a weight again off. And we were actually found out we were pregnant that weekend. So
wow.
It was a bit emotional coming up to that time, obviously, with some of the talk and arguments going around. So it was absolutely like just an electric day for us. We did a picnic with all our family and friends to market, and I was so proud. I'm always proud to be Irish, but what a day to send such a message and be the flagship country to legalise, be the first country to legalise same-sex marriage. It was such a strong message that reverberated around the world by such a small nation, and that's where I think again this is going to be such an epic tournament when I hope the whole of Ireland and any tourist that might be, you know, over here, that they'll get an Irish welcome and see exactly, we know how to party, we know how to host a tournament, and we know how to play rugby, and all them combined is going to be the Union Cup, hopefully. So, I really urge people to get out and get behind the lads. They've done a great job. There's a women's tournament, which we know is going to be historically the first women's tournament. The trophy is named after Dr. Anne-Louise Gilligan, spouse of Minister Sapone, who obviously were, again, leaders in bringing the marriage referendum to Ireland and fight for equality, inclusivity and the LGBT plus community. So all in all, it's just going to be an historic event, and I'm so happy to be the ambassador on the women's side of things.
Yeah, just gone 9 o'clock on this Friday morning. That was Lindsay Peat speaking to Nathan last night. Full interview up on offtheball.com. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
How's it going?
Very good, thanks, yeah. And yourself?
All is good. I'm a bit fearful for the weekend, to be honest with you. My main thought last weekend was that watching Glasgow, it really doesn't matter who wins the second semi-final. They look just so impressive.
Yeah, I had that sense as well last week when they were really clinical, and their attacking mindset in the last kind of 8 or 9 matches has been phenomenal. I think they've been scoring, free flowing. It's you could buy into too much and say that, like Leinster down tools 6 weeks ago, they were already couldn't be caught, guaranteed home semi-final. Glasgow beat them a couple of weeks ago. They've been racking up big scores in everyone they've played recently, and that would make you think it doesn't matter who wins between Munster and Leinster. It's going to be very difficult to beat Glasgow in Glasgow. That hasn't changed. It's going to be difficult to beat them anyway. But I think when you look at the probable Leinster team that'll be named later on today, and the quality they have and the experience they have, I think they'll be able to cope with them. It's about going after them up front and checking, are they brittle in any way? Do they have the fight? Are they physical enough? And this is a different test for Glasgow. Dave Rennie will know that himself, that Leinster are a championship side. They have a lot of quality, pedigree, a lot of hardness and resilience within their group, that it won't be like Glasgow have had in the last 8 matches where they've kind of steamrolled teams and
blitzed them. Like that was the thing. That was the thing in the Ulster match, that they absolutely blitzed them, and Ulster never really looked in it. And like in a lot of ways, you forget that Saracens were the team to knock this Glasgow side out of Ulster. Like, you wonder why they weren't there in the final shake-up. They were beaten by maybe one of the greatest teams they've ever played at a European level. Like, this is, I don't know. It's on the face of it.
When you look at the form, you think, right, Glasgow are irresistible when they get going. Then I kind of went back and I looked at some clips from that Saracens game in the quarterfinals, and that's what Saracens.
Was it double scores?
Yeah, it was 56-27 the final score, and they got a couple of consolations. They started the game really well against Saracens, but just the power and the strength, way more so than what Saracens did to Leinster in that final quarter of that game.
So how do Leinster go about it, I suppose?
Well, they defend well. You can't slip off tackles. You've got to stop the offloads. Scrum line-out has to be good, and be physical. It's something that if Glasgow get on the front foot and they get a couple of scores and get a bit of momentum going, they're very, very dangerous. Adam Hastings has been brilliant for him this year. You know, Finn Russell left last year and there was a gap and a void left after he went, and Adam Hastings, just the way he plays, it suits the style they want to play, and you see a lot of these loopy passes going over the wingers when they come up and in, and they score and they seem to stick all their passes. So Leinster have got to put pressure on them and make sure that, you know, they dislodge the ball, if you like. They stop the passing channels, and no better side to do that in Leinster. They're very, very intelligent in the way they defend. They keep a lot of numbers on their feet. They identify when to attack rucks, when not to attack rucks, and so they're capable of doing that. So it's a completely different ball game here. Glasgow are not going to be running around the place making line breaks willy-nilly. It's going to be different. They'll know that. So for Glasgow's approach probably has to be, here's everything that's happened in the last few weeks. It's in the locker, it's in the bag. If the game opens up any little bit, if we get a line break, we're fairly cohesive and we're ready, and our enthusiasm and awareness around any sorts of line breaks will be good, but we've got to roll up the sleeves. They've got to get, you know, it's the battle up front. Healy and Furlong and Scott Fardy and James Ryan.
Leinster need to make it about that almost,
for sure, and they've got to hold on to the ball really well, and you know, they started very well against Saracens over in Newcastle, where they got the first penalty. They weathered the storm of some Saracens attack, and then they go up, and you know, before like probably 25-30 minutes, I can't remember exactly when they score, Furlong scores, but you just got a sense that Leinster were in a great position themselves, mentally strong. Saracens looked deflated, so they've got to make sure that they kind of set the tone early on tomorrow with a physicality and an intensity that maybe Glasgow haven't been used to in the last few weeks. So they want to try and shock them a little bit. I think they will have spoken about that, and they'll know how good Leinster are. So it's an intriguing one.
The one thing that, because you've spoken about it, and I'd definitely be of the same view, that Leinster, and I think you make the broader point about maybe some other Irish teams at the minute, need to play a bit of territory, kick in behind, push them into the corners. They're the sort of teams, though, that it strikes me that they have that capacity to play a bit of barbarian style. They can score from anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. And they're narky as well. They have a little bit of an edge to them, so they'll be really up for this, and they'll probably get in Leinster's face. So discipline is going to be key as well. How Leinster cope with that bit of pressure, and there's probably more pressure in Leinster given the loss in the final, and you know, if they lose this game, they're giving up the Pro14 as well. Glasgow, they've got to ask the questions of Glasgow, not stop Glasgow playing, but impose themselves, if that makes sense. So if you go out to stop a team who are kind of very approach, it is, and it can be dangerous. So Leinster have just got to try and get on the front foot themselves, have a really good set piece, which we know they have. Get on the front foot, get Robbie Henshaw attacking, carrying ball, get the ball in Ringrose's hands, ask the questions themselves, and you know, the way they can recycle the ball and hold on to the ball. But I think that is probably going to be key, how they manage the territory as well. Leinster don't need to play all the rugby here tomorrow. Leinster, I think they just need to play in the right areas and play sensible rugby, and then, you know, physically match Glasgow and go beyond that, if you like. Because to be fair to them, they're no slouches themselves up front. You know, Johnny Gray, Fagerson's been brilliant for them. Callum Gibbons, the New Zealand 7, is very, very strong. They have a lot of good players as well, and it'll be really interesting how that game goes. If it opens up completely, you think that'll suit Glasgow? And that's no disrespect to Leinster, that they can play a brilliant game as well, and they love attacking rugby. But I think Leinster need to just keep it simple tomorrow and grind out and frustrate Glasgow a little bit, where they're not making these line breaks. Tommy Seymour isn't shooting up the field. Johnson, the centre, isn't, you know, flying around the place. Knock them back a little bit and frustrate them. But it's two very, very good sides, and the best sides in the league this year.
You say Leinster need to keep their discipline, which is obviously true. But like, you look at that Saracens game, and people could say Mara Itoje should have got 2 or 3 yellow cards in that game. Saracens were definitely the team closer to the edge that day than Leinster were. Yeah. Could that be seen as an issue? Granted, Jerome Garces had a big say that day.
Well, Nigel Owens is reffing tomorrow, and I don't think he'll. I think he'll manage that well, because his communication is quite good. And Glasgow are a play on the edge. There's no doubt about that, and Leinster will know that.
As in, what do you mean?
They push the boundaries. They're counter-rucking a lot. They're
like on the borderline illegal.
Borderline, yeah. And look, all teams are starting to do that. It's
like in from the side and
edge,
sort of,
pressure here, there, and everywhere. And I think that will is something Leinster will have to cope with and deal with. And I think Nigel Owens will manage that well, and he'll probably have spoken to both sides. But
yeah, you assume that
we were seeing a trend in the game anyway, Adrian, of a lot of offsides and in-your-face style.
I don't understand when you see that manifesting itself, right? Because the communication is what it is, and we see the level of communication that's there long before the game even begins. At times, the referee can be in camp at some point during the week, and there's a discussion that takes place. Surely, if you're Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster in this context, you're in Nigel Owens' ear at some point way before the game, saying, "Listen, by the way, this is what's going to happen. You need to make sure that they're not at that." I don't understand in that context how it ever happens. How it ever actually happens on match day.
But it continuously happens, and
it's
like some of them are right on the mark of getting off the line and when the ball has been passed. But it's I've said this many times. I think we need to try and introduce something where it's a yard behind the hindmost foot at the breakdown, which will stop this.
That's right. Yeah.
This sprinting up. Some people are counter-arguing that and saying, well, that will give the opposition, the attack, more of a chance to run and get up to speed. But I think it'll give the attack more of a chance to be evasive and to pass and to move the ball a little bit more, because we're seeing a lot of collisions right on the gain line. And Leinster do it, Glasgow will do it tomorrow, they'll all do it. The referee needs more help from his assistants, and unless... I think there needs to be a clearer guideline and a law change around the breakdown. There's many issues around the breakdown with side entries off your feet. Rugby's evolving all the time, and it's getting more physical.
The gate seems to become a grey area.
Listen, if you're a referee out there, it's impossible to look left, right, see everything that's going on. There's so many things happening, and that's a real area of tomorrow that needs to be on, both sides needs to be on, and then get a bit of good fortune, maximise your opportunity. But going back to what I said about Glasgow, they're a very, very good side. They're full of Scottish internationals. They're on the front foot in recent weeks. Leinster are the ones that have got to go and impose themselves here early on, and there's no doubt they can do that. They're a side full of quality. And if they can bring the intensity from the Champions Cup final that they matched and brought themselves, well, I think they'll be, they could frustrate and upset Glasgow.
We'll know the teams in a few hours. So this will be out of date soon. But Sexton start?
Yeah, for sure. He has to start. I think. I thought it was really it was a risk last week. Ross Byrne, very good player, but they had the confidence to do that. Leo Cullen had the confidence.
But they know they're playing against a second-tier team. They can.
It's hard to put up with him, isn't it?
Insufferable.
It was a weird one, though. I genuinely thought it was a bit of a weird one for such an important game.
Yeah, because it was one of those games where we were all kind of going, well, even Leinster people were saying this is very dangerous, this Munster side, Leinster bruised and battered.
It's great that they got through it, and Byrne got that exposure.
Yeah, for sure, because he's a very good player, a superb player, and to have the confidence for Leo Cullen and Contepomi and Stuart Lancaster to make that decision to say we're going to put him on the bench. Now, who knows? He may not have trained much at the start of that week because of some of the bangs and knocks.
In the background.
So and we know the way the modern day game is gone, where a lot of coaches now are going, well, look, if you're not on the training field on Tuesday, you're a risk. Because back in my day, it was a lot of, well, if the guy made it to Friday and he didn't train all week, he was fine if he did the captain's run. Yeah. But now, because of trying to implement game plans and the structure and stuff. So it was a risk, but he comes back in. He brings a wealth of experience and a real steel about him. But the one area I think for Johnny tomorrow is going back to the Luke McGrath not kicking the ball out at half time, saying, well, we have a confidence to play and we want to play. I just think they need to be careful with that tomorrow, because Glasgow are a team that can capitalise on mistakes, and they'll be full of that energy tomorrow. Stuart Hogg gets the ball, Seymour, these guys, very dangerous. So you don't want to be making mistakes in your own half and coughing up the ball. So I think tactically and territorially they've got to play smart tomorrow.
I wonder if that's going to have a bigger impact than we think it is, that Luke McGrath half-time thing, because my stance on it was that, especially after what Johnny Sexton said afterwards, that it was the right thing to do. The intention was the correct thing to do. It would be an awful shame if this Leinster team started to become inhibited.
I guarantee you that, and I'd be very surprised if they knew the clock was in the red and said we're going to keep playing. I bet you they didn't even know it was in the red, but their mentality was to play and go for it, and which has to be admired. But you know, Saracens are a much stronger team than Glasgow, and they've proven they're stronger than Leinster physically. It was still a game that Leinster could have, if they look back and if they did things differently, they could have won it. But yeah, I just think it'll be different against Glasgow if you're going to try and play out from your own 22. There's every chance you can do that. Leinster can do that. It's much riskier because Saracens were so powerful as a side right across their backline as well. So I'm not saying that they shouldn't play. Of course they should play, because Leinster are the champions. They're the team on with the pedigree, and they've been there, done that. Absolutely, they should go for it. And they've shown over the years when they hold on to the ball, they can wear the life out of teams, and they have enough quality and power to steamroll teams as well. But just to manage it well, because the last thing they need tomorrow is to give any sort of easy scores over to Glasgow, because if they get a score or two and they get their tails up, they are capable of causing damage, and they're capable of doing that tomorrow as well.
Who wins it?
I think Leinster will win it, because I think they have enough experience and drive to get the job done. But they've got to be very conscious of the dangers that, and look, they will. They'll have watched the games. I just think this is going to be a different game for Glasgow, and all that confidence they've built up over the last game, scoring between 30 and 50 points every time they played, it's going to be different, and they're not going to do that tomorrow. They're not going to score that much. So I just think Leinster slightly, but they're a serious threat, Glasgow. Given it's on in Glasgow as well, and they'll have huge motivation, obviously, to win a final, but Stuart Hogg is leaving. Maybe the Leo Cullen comments this earlier in the week about the Glasgow players being Rangers fans, maybe that'll irk them a little bit. But Leinster are certainly good enough to do the job, to get the job done. But they've got to go and perform tomorrow now and play well, because this is a good Glasgow side.
Do it for Munster, is that what you're saying, after beating
them? Do it for Irish rugby, Adrian. Stop trying to drag us Munster people into your kind of smart comments.
Speaking of
for Leinster, I think, look, I even said it on breakfast radio this morning, given what happened last year in 2018 and the confidence and the high that all the Irish rugby players are on, if Leinster were to lose this, you'd have the disappointment of Six Nations, Champions Cup, Pro14, Munster's probably pessimism that's hanging around there at the moment, Ulster kind of limping out in the semi-final last week. Ulster, in a sense, will be probably more glass half full scenario, given where they were last year. Connacht had a pretty positive season, getting into the Champions Cup again. But I think for the Ulster, the Leinster and Munster players, they would kind of be ending up going to a World Cup with a bit of negative baggage in the head. So I think from an Irish perspective, for World Cup, it'd be good to have those Leinster players actually reinforcing their confidence.
Couple of quick things to touch on before we let you off. David Newsfor, Irish RFU Performance Director, has been out and about, some interesting stuff to say. I don't know if you've seen much of these quotes this morning, but stuff about the future of the women's game, stuff about Rob Kearney's contract negotiations, and it's grabbed a lot of headlines. Ireland must make semi-final for this to be a success. It seems like a statement of the obvious to me in some ways.
It is, yeah, and I suppose that would be part of his remit and his own goal setting to get to semi-final. We all know that. I think it's.
Is there anything that he said that you saw in any of them that it's all fairly measured, kind of?
Yeah, it is pretty measured. I think he's done a very good job, and I think he's been a success. He hasn't. The provinces have given out at times that. And I think they can all have particularly Ulster, Leinster, Munster can all have a bit of a quib at different situations where he blocked moves or didn't allow guys come in. Leinster probably more recently with the Joey Carberry going to Munster. Ulster with the Rune Pienaar thing. That was probably the most high-profile one.
Yeah.
But it worked out incredibly well with John Cooney going there, and so I think
all look like good calls now.
Yeah, well, I think Leinster are probably the ones who are probably the most frustrated, losing Joey Carberry last year and then Geordie Murphy. I think it's still down to individual choices. I don't think David Nucifora or Joe Schmidt at any stage have said to a player, you have to go, or else.
He did seem to be saying that to either Joey Carberry or Ross Byrne last year, didn't he?
Seemed to be.
I know, yeah, look at
so.
He's probably giving them good advice. I mean, if Joe sits you down and he goes, listen,
he can suggest
I think you might,
he can suggest it.
If Joe says that to me, I'm like,
ultimately, if a player decides to stay where they are and they have a contract in that province, I think that I genuinely believe that would be respected, and I think it'd be the same scenario for anyone. Ideally, like we said, that if there's X number of players in one position in one province, ideally from an Irish point of view is to move them around. So he's brought in that kind of policy and that mentality of a bit more player movement. Top players, we've seen it with younger players a lot over the years, particularly guys going to Connacht to get an opportunity, and the success of them coming back. Owen Redden, Sean Cronin, these guys who became top class internationals. So I think David Nucifora and it was a very good appointment because it was giving control to someone and it was taking it away from your committee type decisions where everyone has an opinion. He's a strong voice and has that authority to make those decisions and doesn't please everyone every time. I'm sure all the provinces are knocking on his door over the years to sign this guy, that guy, and look for funds. And his job is to try and have the provinces strong, and in turn has the national team strong and bring players through. So I think he's done a very good job, and I think it's good that he's there for the next couple of years again.
The new kit, yeah or nay?
I like it, yeah. I like it. You wouldn't want to be carrying any excess weight.
That's the alternate jersey.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to be carrying any excess weight?
I saw the one on Joey Carberry, and it was glued to him, and I was just thinking if you were carrying any little excess around the belly, it wouldn't be great.
Great
the props hate the tight jerseys. They hate the tight jerseys. But it's a nice kit. It's a nice jersey.
The away one, the alternate one, is nearly nicer. It's very tasty. I mean, the blue in it probably is the thing that's attracting me there, Quinny, as you can tell. But nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, to be fair.
What do you think, on?
Colours anymore.
I'm a home jersey guy, definitely.
Oh, yeah,
the home jersey.
What do you mean? Just in this instance?
Just it's a much nicer jersey.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Shall we buy you one? Would you wear it?
Have your boys Connacht got a new jersey out yet? No.
On that note, as every week, as predictable as Night Follows Day. Quinny, thanks a million.
You're a Connacht man, though. Tell the truth.
Thanks very much, Quinny, for coming in. I'm going to stop thanking you now if you keep at that shite. But thanks a lot for coming in. We'll see how your prediction goes. Glasgow at the weekend. We are going to talk football next. We've Keith Andrews. What are you laughing about?
I just love the way it winds you up so much. It really does.
It's just like there's no. It's nonsense.
You're from Connacht.
I'm not from Connacht.
What have you got against Connacht that you disown them?
Well, the fact that I'm from Leinster would be the main.
You're not from Leinster, you're from Connacht.
The producer's telling me to shut you up and move on, so that's what I'm going to do. And stop thanking you. 22 minutes past 9 on this Friday morning. Somebody will hopefully speak a bit of sense to us. Keith Andrews, good morning to you.
Morning, pal. I didn't know you were from Connacht either.
Oh, listen, will you stop it. Stop it. Right, let's talk. I did start out by saying somebody to talk some sense, so don't let me down here.
Go ahead.
Right, the Villa derby, obviously in the Championship playoff, it's on Monday, and just a 170 million quid resting on this one. And so delighted, Keith, you take the time this morning to have a chat to us about it. It's 5th against 6th in regulation play, obviously, with these two. Which of them, to begin with, would you think would be more likely, outside of any additions they might add, would be more likely to survive in the Premier League?
I think they both have the financial clout. Obviously, historically, Villa would be the bigger club and they'd be the bigger draw. I suppose people in around my age, your age, and would have been just used to Villa being a Premier League club, and they've been out of it now for a few years. We've seen Leeds obviously fall in the playoffs as well. We thought they might get back into it. But Villa, to be fair to them, they've been on a magnificent run. They went on that 10 games in a row where they won. Ironically, that was the first game they played against Derby County earlier in the season. 4-0, they beat them. They went on that 10-game run. Both sides are in decent form. You'd have to say that. So on paper, it should be an entertaining game, but having been at quite a few of these games, nerves more often than not take over for obvious reasons, and we rarely get great spectacles, but I'm more hopeful of this one.
Did Derby knock a bit too much out of the win over Leeds, Keith, do you think? Like, even looking at the interviews on the pitch afterwards, like how much it meant to all the players that were nearly in tears, listen to Frank Lampard about how much had gone into it. Like, it almost felt to some degree it was nearly their final.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it stemmed from what happened earlier in the season with the whole Spygate, the Bielsa thing, the fact that they'd been written off really by most, the fact that they'd lost 3 times on the spin by Leeds. It was unlikely, wasn't it? All the stats suggested if you lose your first home game in the playoffs, that you don't get through. So it was all stacked against them. So I think it was sheer emotion, relief. It spilled over, but knowing the coaching staff and the experience they have, I think that they've brought that right back down to earth in the days commencing that game against Leeds. And then I think it'll be fine, Adrian. I think they'll go into it obviously knowing what they need to do. The game plan will be set in place. They've been away training in Portugal, so they'll be in a good place. Whether or not key players will be ready injury wise, I'm not so sure. They might have a few that'll be missing that could prove to be key.
Yeah, you mentioned some of those key coaches. We had one of them on last week. Keith, Shay Given was with us. He gave us his take on how he thought this game was going to go. The Shay Given Derby, they're calling it.
Yeah, never mind Terry Lampard. We got the real man.
You guys in the studio just.
Yeah, absolutely. You heard it here first.
The red velvet cake and the Shay Given Derby.
How much are you looking forward to it? And I mean, like we mentioned the Leeds results during the week, during the year. They haven't been something similar against Villa as well. So yeah. How much are you looking forward to try and get stuck into that and reverse that?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be very tough. You know, we've lost both games home and away to Villa, and they've been very strong. And as I said, we have to get back to probably where we were the other night, and to have any chance of getting through, and you know, hopefully some of the Villa players have a little bit of an off day. But it's a one-off game. It's a cup final. It's a massive game, and you know, even talking about it, sort of the hairs are standing up in the back of my neck already. And it's whatever 10 days away. So it's, you know, come kick-off time, we will be ready, and you know, the Derby fans will be right behind us as well. And you know, Derby, Wembley, have been there, you know, as a player, and the last time actually was in cup final for Aston Villa, would you believe? So this is going to be very, very special. You know, as a coach, if we can get it done, it'll be super. I mean, just, you know, hard to think that way at the minute because we've got a lot of planning to do and training and preparation. But you know, we're giving ourselves a chance.
He mentions it there, Keith. You mentioned it yourself. The results against Villa this season, like the most recent one, very recently, a 4-0 pumping at Villa Park. Like, there's no 7-0 over the two legs, over the two different games. Almost no reason for hope here for Derby fans.
Yeah,
on the face of it.
That would suggest that. But and I mentioned it again about Leeds, that Leeds had beaten them quite comfortably as well, on 2-3 occasions. But where you look at what they've produced since then, and I think you're looking at a different type of Derby County, a different type of mentality. They've been invigorated. They've got a new found energy about the team, where I thought with the cup exploits that they had gone quite well in both cup competitions, but they were struggling. They'd hit a bit of a brick wall. That hasn't been the case. They found it from somewhere, and they finished the season very, very well.
Keith, which of these two teams survives or has a better chance of surviving the Premier League? Because I know that's not the same thing as saying who's got the better chance of actually winning on Monday.
Yeah, you would have to say Villa because of the size of the club, and I think the financial clout that they do have. I think both of them, if they got up, they would compete. I think the loan market has been absolutely key to success that both of the clubs have had. Getting the likes of Tammy Abraham for Villa, Tyrone Mings has been a revelation at centre half, and then for Derby we've seen Harry Wilson and Mason Mount, the success they've had this season. So I think they would have to do the same again next season. But look, financially, they both kind of need this. You know, Derby, it's been hyped around football circles that they do need this. The owner has been pulling back in recent months. They've had to balance the books because they have overspent in recent seasons to try to get to the Premier League, and it hasn't quite happened. But to answer your question, I would say Villa more likely to stay up. But who's going to win on Monday? I really haven't got a clue. It's going to be very, very close.
The last 7 days or so, Keith, have got a lot of people thinking about the future of football in England, and especially outside the top six and outside the top tier in the Premier League. The inevitability of Manchester City's domestic treble has been held up as a thing that even when you take away the top six versus the rest in the Premier League, it's coming to a point where it's getting a little bit more pedestrian for the top teams. The knock-on effect for that is the football in England outside the top tier, which inevitably will get to the point where we might start having concerns about the Championship. Like you've rightly said, that this is possibly the most exciting division in English football. Are you concerned that the way football has gone this season in England with elitism, that the Championship could regress a little bit in the next couple of years?
No, I don't think so. I think the top 6, 7, whatever way you want to put it, there's even tiers within that now, isn't there? There has been over the last year or so. But I think the breakdown of that below that, because I cover a lot of the games in the bottom half of the Premier League on weekends, and what you see in those type of games is that there's a fear of losing. You flip it to the Championship, that they're all striving to win, and more often than not, in terms of the quality, okay, 2 or 3 players might make a little bit of a difference, but in the main, you look at some of the coaches, what they're trying to do tactically, there isn't a hell of a lot of difference between the top level of the Championship and the bottom 6, 8 teams of the Premier League. But I absolutely take your point about the top 6 and the divide that's starting to appear, probably more evidently than we've ever seen.
You obviously, as you've said already, Keith, pay pretty close attention to the Championship. From what you've seen, is Frank Lampard a Premier League manager? Yeah, I think when you look at someone like him and that type of Steven Gerrard, and I don't know, John Terry took him into the equation because he's going to be involved on Monday as an assistant. I think what they've got to do, they've got to go and prove themselves. They've got to go and give us a flavour of what they would be like as a manager. So when you look at what that Derby team were like last year, wind it back 12 months ago when they were in the playoffs, the personnel that they had, he's totally transformed the way they play. They play with energy, they play on the front foot, they play with a real flair and passion. If you think about Lampard's team that he played in under Jose Mourinho first time around, that 4-3-3 where they're all at it, they're banging people's faces, they're playing with a real energy and appetite for the game. That's what he's done, and he's introduced a lot of young players. Having said that, he's tapped into the loan market very well, and his relationships with Chelsea, because he's got 2 very good players. Tomori at the back with Richard Keogh has been a revelation, and in central midfield, Mason Mount has been one of the standout performers. Yeah, the best thing for Richard Keogh might be that Derby don't make the Premier League, but I know you're not going to comment on that, so I won't ask you. But you give me a less political answer if you can on Luca Quinaln. We've been discussing him during the week. I'm sure he's a player, given your interest in the Championship, that you've seen a bit of. Curtis Fleming was on yesterday, spoke very highly of him. Great attitude, great pass, standout player. Would you cap him now? Would that be your approach? No, I wouldn't, unless he deserves it in training and what he showed. I think when you look at what he's achieved this season under very difficult circumstances at Bolton, he's shown, and in the games which I have seen, he's stood up to be counted. He's shown a real maturity about how he wants to go and play the game. His contract's obviously up, so he'll more than likely not be at Bolton next season. I think he'll be off the pastures now, but he's a very bright talent. I had him a couple of years ago with the underage teams. Lovely young man, and he's clearly a talented player that's developed well over the last couple of years, so I'm sure he's got a bright future. What are the qualities that you've seen in him? Yeah, I would echo a little bit what Curtis has said. He's a central midfielder that links up play very well. He plays with his head up, looks to pass forward. He's a nice balance for being a left footer. And he's obviously very distinguishable with that haircut. I mean, I'm not going to make the obvious gag, right? No. I'll go against all my natural urges and not make that gag. Keith, pleasure as always. Thanks a million. Thanks, lads. Take care. Keith Andrews on the line there ahead of the big game. A few days into it yet. So, is it Monday? It's a bank holiday in the UK, so it's Monday afternoon, is it? Yeah. Yeah, good. You watch it? Yeah, well, it's usually, what is it usually, 3 or 5 o'clock kickoff? Yeah, so... It's just the stakes that really make it, and you can compare it to any other sport really. As long as the stakes are high, and it's in front of you, and the quality is relatively good, or at least the 2 teams are of a similar level, you'll watch it. And there's quite a few things in other games that we'll watch this weekend where there isn't that much at stake, and there's a huge disparity in quality, and it won't be as enjoyable. But Monday will be one of the sporting events of the weekend, if you want to include it in that. Japan by the way, very British thing to say. Yeah, no, I'll mention it to you after. Japan in the fall. Japan in the fall is a suggestion from somebody. Certainly a suggestion. F. Bellew on. Is it Francie himself, I wonder? I mean, maybe. Barry Hawke says you're Connacht. Admit it. You are Connacht. I mean, just look at you. Right, the question that, before we leave everybody, that we need to get to is, what's the plans for the weekend, on? Working tomorrow. All right, you're presenting? Yeah. What have you got on? Saturday panel. Who's on the Saturday panel? Neil's Nod to Tokyo, or whatever we're going to call it. Yeah. The Tracy's Tokyo. The Japan Jaunt, that's coming up.
and plenty of football as well, kind of with the Champions League next week, and live scores throughout the day before and during the GA
That
matches.
is the vaguest sort of general summation of what normally happens on a Saturday After Ball show. But what specifically is happening tomorrow?
I'll be keeping my cards close to my chest.
You got it
for the time being.
Got a clue. Very good. And anything else you need to update us on? You going to any games?
Not this weekend, unfortunately.
You're
Are you?
yourself? No.
What are you going? What does a regular weekend constitute for Adrian Barry?
That's a whole show in itself.
How much time do you spend thinking about my weekend during your weekend?
Not really much post our conversation. I won't lie to you. Generally, it's like a short window in my week where I ask you about it. I think, that all seems to have a great life, and then I move on with my life and come back to it a week later.
How much time are you going to spend in a wetsuit this weekend?
I may not spend any more time in a wetsuit before the actual race. In the water, of course. I mean...
What, do you just like to zip up and just waddle around the house?
Go for a walk around the house, yeah. Waddle, thanks on. That's,
It's hard to move your limbs in a wetsuit, to be fair.
I actually find it quite restrictive, but I mean, I don't want to be getting into any excuse game here. So yeah, well listen, enjoy your weekend. I think that's pretty much it. There's I'm sure, an excellent Off the Ball coming your way tomorrow from 1 o'clock on News Talk, although we don't know the details just yet. Somebody made all of them, just the presenter isn't fully aware of them at this particular moment in time. We're back on air and online from 7 o'clock tonight and right across the weekend. The off the wall take on the final Game of Thrones is live. Andy has had plenty to say on that, so you do check that out. The hurling show is back as well. Went live for the first time this season yesterday, and that both of those living on offtheball.com. For myself and Owen from now, we're back live 7:30 on Monday. But for now, good morning.